Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Ultimate Fanfiction. We are thrilled to present today's story, What If Ragnok Found 89 Illegal Withdrawals from Potter Vaults and Harry Sued Dumbledore for 5 million Galleons. If these stories bring joy to your day, please consider liking and subscribing. Every bit of support helps us continue this passion project. Now, prepare yourself for an amazing tale. Chapter 1, Ledgers Don't Lie. The owl arrived at 4 in the morning. Harry Potter jolted awake at the sharp tap against his bedroom window, instinctively reaching for his wand before his eyes had fully opened. After the Department of Mysteries, after Sirius, sleep came in restless fragments haunted by whispered voices from beyond the veil. The bird silhouette against the pre-dawn sky was almost a relief, something real to focus on. He crossed the small bedroom in 3 steps, unlatched the window, and admitted an imposing eagle owl with sleek black feathers. It regarded him with imperious amber eyes before extending its leg, where a letter sealed with gold wax bore the unmistakable emblem of Gringotts Bank. "Bit early for banking, isn't it?" Harry muttered, accepting the envelope. The owl didn't deign to respond, instead giving him an expectant look that suggested it required an immediate reply. Harry broke the seal and unfolded heavy parchment inscribed with sharp, precise lettering. "Mr. Potter, your immediate presence is required at Gringotts Bank regarding a matter of extreme urgency concerning your accounts. A discrepancy has been detected that requires your personal attention. This letter serves as both summons and portkey. It will activate precisely at 9 a.m. Security protocols dictate that you must arrive alone. May your gold flow and your enemies tremble." Director Ragnok, head of Gringotts Bank. Harry read the letter twice, his brow furrowing. Director Ragnok? He'd never heard of him, and in 5 years of wizarding life, he'd never received correspondence from anyone at Gringotts beyond his annual statements. What discrepancy, he wondered aloud, turning the letter over. Nothing more was written. The owl hooted impatiently. "Right." Harry grabbed a self-inking quill from his desk. "Just a moment." He scrawled a hasty response on the back of the letter. "Director Ragnok, I'll be there at 9 a.m. as requested." Harry Potter the owl accepted the folded parchment, gave a dignified hoot, and departed through the open window. Harry watched it disappear into the lightning sky before collapsing back onto his bed, letter still clutched in his hand. Sleep was out of the question now. His mind raced with possibilities. Had someone broken into his vault? Had the ministry found some new way to target him through his finances? Or was it something to do with Sirius? The thought of his godfather sent a fresh wave of grief washing over him. He'd been gone less than a month, and the wound remained raw. Harry spent the next 4 hours in a state of anxious anticipation. He showered, dressed in the best of his limited wardrobe, a pair of jeans without holes and one of the few shirts Dudley hadn't stretched beyond recognition, and attempted to flatten his perpetually unruly hair. The Dursleys were away for the weekend at some company retreat, leaving him mercifully alone with his thoughts. At precisely 8:59, Harry stood in the center of his room, the Gringotts letter held tightly in his right hand, his wand in his left. His trunk was packed, just in case. He'd learned the hard way to be prepared. The clock on his bedside table ticked over to 9 o'clock, and Harry felt the familiar hook behind his navel as the portkey activated. The world dissolved into a blur of color and motion before he landed, stumbling slightly, in a richly appointed office. Recovery was immediate. After years of magical transportation mishaps, he'd finally learned to land without completely embarrassing himself. He straightened, taking in his surroundings with practiced wariness. The office was unlike any he'd seen at Gringotts. Where the bank's public areas favored imposing marble and obvious displays of security, this space spoke of understated wealth and power. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, interspersed with weapons that appeared both ancient and deadly. A massive desk of polished obsidian dominated the room, behind which sat a goblin whose appearance immediately commanded attention. Unlike the tellers Harry had encountered before, this goblin wore a tailored suit of midnight blue with gold accents that matched the numerous rings adorning his long fingers. His features were sharper, more defined than those of other goblins Harry had seen, and the intelligence in his dark eyes was unmistakable. Most striking was the thin scar that ran from his right temple to the corner of his mouth, giving him a perpetually grim expression. "Mr. Potter," the goblin acknowledged, his voice deeper than Harry expected. "I am Director Ragnok. Please, be seated." Harry took the indicated chair opposite the desk, noticing as he did that it was sized for humans, unusual in goblin territory. "You mentioned a discrepancy in my accounts," Harry said, getting straight to the point. Ragnok's expression tightened, the scar along his face becoming more pronounced. "Discrepancy is a polite term for what we've uncovered, Mr. Potter. A routine audit revealed something far more troubling." He opened a ledger bound in red leather. "Tell me, when was the last time you personally authorized a withdrawal from your vaults?" Harry blinked in confusion. "I've only ever made withdrawals when I visit before the school year. I take enough for supplies and spending money for the term." "And you've never authorized anyone else to access your vaults? No standing withdrawals or transfers?" "No," Harry said, a knot forming in his stomach. "Should I have?" Ragnok's fingers tensed against the ledger. "No, Mr. Potter, you absolutely should not have. Which makes the existence of 89 unauthorized withdrawals extremely concerning." 89. Harry repeated, sure he'd misheard. "There must be some mistake. Gringotts does not make mistakes in accounting, Mr. Potter." Ragnok's voice carried an edge of professional offense. "The discrepancies were discovered during a security upgrade of our lineage-based vaults. Your family vault triggered multiple alerts." "My family vault?" Harry leaned forward. "I only know about my trust vault, the one I visit for school supplies." Ragnok went very still, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "You were never informed of your family vault? Or the Potter investment vault? Or the Black family vault you inherited upon the death of Sirius Black?" Harry felt as if he'd been struck. "No," he managed, his voice strained. "No one ever told me about any of that." The goblin's expression darkened. "Then we have an even greater problem than I initially suspected." He snapped his fingers, and a younger goblin entered carrying a stack of ledgers. "These are the complete records of all Potter and Black holdings," Ragnok explained as the assistant arranged the books on the desk. "We'll start with the unauthorized withdrawals, as they are the most pressing concern." He opened the topmost ledger, turning it so Harry could see. Row after row of figures marched across the page in precise columns, each entry marked with dates, amounts, and what appeared to be authorization codes. These highlighted entries, Ragnok indicated with one long finger, represent withdrawals made without your magical signature or physical presence. The earliest dates back to November 1981, 1 week after your parents' deaths. Harry stared at the entry, November 7, 1981, transfer to Albus Dumbledore personal account, 50,000 Galleons, Educational Trust Establishment. "Dumbledore?" Harry whispered, his chest constricting. "He's been taking money from my vault." Not just once, Ragnok turned the page to reveal more highlighted entries. "Regularly, over the course of 15 years. The total sum amounts to 3.7 million Galleons." The room seemed to spin around Harry as he tried to comprehend the figure. He knew little about wizarding finances, but even he understood this was an enormous sum. "How?" he finally asked. "How could he access my vaults without my permission?" Ragnok's expression was grim. "Albus Dumbledore presented documentation to Gringotts claiming magical guardianship over you following your parents' deaths. At the time, in the chaos that followed the fall of the Dark Lord, such claims were processed with less scrutiny than would be appropriate today. And no one ever checked." Harry demanded, anger beginning to build beneath his shock. "In 15 years, no one ever verified whether he had the right." "Goblin-wizard relations have historically been complicated," Ragnok said carefully. "Until recently, we were forbidden from questioning the magical guardianship documentation provided by wizards, particularly wizards of Dumbledore's stature. It was only when our new treaty with the ICW granted us greater autonomy in our security protocols that we began the audit that revealed these discrepancies. Harry ran a hand through his hair, trying to process what he was hearing. Where did the money go? What did he use it for? Ragnok opened another ledger. The transfers fall into several categories. Some went directly to Dumbledore's personal accounts. Others were distributed to various individuals and organizations. He turned the book to show Harry. The list made Harry's blood run cold. Monthly transfer, 500 galleons, Order of the Phoenix Operational Fund monthly transfer, 300 galleons, Dursley family stipend for Potter Care annual transfer, 5,000 galleons, Weasley family educational support monthly transfer, 200 galleons, Arabella Fig surveillance compensation. The entries continued. Page after page of people being paid from his money, people he knew, people he trusted. The Dursleys had been receiving money for his care. Money they'd clearly never spent on him while he wore Dudley's cast-offs and slept in a cupboard. And the Weasleys. Does Ron know about this? Harry asked, his voice barely audible. Do any of them know where this money comes from? We cannot determine who was aware of the source of the funds, Ragnok replied. Only that the transfers were authorized by Albus Dumbledore using your family vault as the source. Harry stared at the ledger, feeling as if the ground beneath him was crumbling away. Everything he thought he knew, the Weasleys taking him in out of kindness, Dumbledore protecting him out of duty to his parents, suddenly seemed suspect. Mr. Potter, Ragnok's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. There is more you need to know, but first, I must ask, what do you wish to do about these unauthorized withdrawals? Harry looked up, suddenly aware of the tears of anger threatening at the corners of his eyes. He blinked them back fiercely. What can I do? Under Goblin law, theft from a vault is punishable by death, Ragnok stated matter-of-factly. Under Wizarding law, the unauthorized use of another's vault carries penalties of financial restitution and possible imprisonment. I don't want anyone dead, Harry said quickly. But I want. He paused, trying to articulate the storm of emotions raging inside him. I want justice. I want everyone to know what he did. I want my money back. And I want to understand why. Ragnok nodded, seeming almost pleased with Harry's response. Then I recommend legal action. Gringotts can provide evidence for a formal lawsuit against Albus Dumbledore for the misappropriation of Potter family funds. We would seek full restitution plus punitive damages. A lawsuit? Harry repeated. The concept seemed almost absurd, Harry Potter suing Albus Dumbledore. Yet, as the initial shock began to fade, a cold anger took its place. Yes. Let's do that. Very well. Ragnok made a note in a separate ledger. Gringotts will begin preparing the necessary documentation. Given the high-profile nature of both parties involved, we recommend engaging specialized legal counsel. He paused, studying Harry. Unless you already have a family solicitor. Harry gave a bitter laugh. I didn't even know I had family vaults until 10 minutes ago. So no family solicitor that I'm aware of. Unsurprising, considering the efforts made to keep you uninformed of your inheritance, Ragnok said with a hint of disgust. In that case, I can provide a list of recommended wizarding law firms experienced in cases of financial malfeasance. I'd appreciate that, Harry nodded, then hesitated. Director Ragnok, why are you helping me? I thought goblins stayed neutral in wizard affairs. Ragnok's scarred face remained impassive, but his eyes gleamed with something Harry couldn't quite identify. Gringotts values three things above all else, Mr. Potter: gold, honor, and the sanctity of our contracts. This situation has violated all three. Your gold was taken without authorization. The honor of our security protocols was compromised. And the contract between Gringotts and the Potter family, one of our oldest vault holders, was disregarded. He leaned forward slightly. Make no mistake, our interests align in this matter, but they are not identical. Justice for you means restoration of proper banking protocols for us. Harry found the straightforward answer oddly reassuring. At least someone was being honest with him. Now, Ragnok continued, before we proceed further, there is the matter of your inheritance that must be addressed. It appears you have been kept deliberately ignorant of your family's legacy. That ends today. He reached into a drawer and withdrew a small wooden box carved with an intricate crest, a shield bearing a griffin rampant. This is the Potter family's signet ring. As the last of the Potter line, it rightfully belongs to you. Once you claim it, you will be recognized as head of House Potter, despite your age. He slid the box across the desk. Harry stared at it for a moment before reaching out with slightly trembling fingers. The box felt warm to the touch, as if it had been sitting in sunlight rather than a drawer. When he opened it, he found a gold ring bearing the same crest, a small ruby gleaming in the center of the shield. What does being head of house mean? Harry asked, not yet touching the ring. It grants you legal independence, Ragnok explained. You would no longer require a magical guardian. You would have full access to all Potter properties and assets. Most importantly, it would emancipate you under wizarding law, allowing you to bring legal action in your own name. Harry picked up the ring, feeling its surprising weight in his palm. Will this affect the trace? Can the Ministry still detect my magic? A hint of what might have been a smile crossed Ragnok's face. The trace is a Ministry restriction on underage wizards. The head of an ancient house is not considered underage, regardless of physical years. Harry slipped the ring onto his right hand. For a moment, nothing happened, then a warm surge of magic flowed from the ring up his arm and throughout his body. The sensation wasn't uncomfortable, rather, it felt like coming home, like a part of himself he hadn't known was missing had finally been restored. The ring resized itself to fit his finger perfectly. The ring has accepted you, Ragnok observed with satisfaction. You are now officially Lord Potter, head of the ancient and noble house of Potter. Harry stared at the ring, watching how the ruby caught the light. Lord Potter, he repeated quietly. No one ever told me my family had a title. One of many things kept from you, it seems, Ragnok replied. There is also the matter of the Black family inheritance. As Sirius Black's named heir, you have claim to the Black family title and assets as well. Another box appeared on the desk, this one made of dark wood with silver inlay forming a crest Harry recognized from Grimmauld Place, the Black family crest. 2 lordships? Harry asked, bewildered. It is unusual but not unprecedented, Ragnok said. The Black family ring may be more difficult. The Black family magic tends to be discriminating. Harry opened the box to reveal a silver ring set with a black diamond. Unlike the Potter ring, this one seemed to emanate a cold intensity that made Harry hesitate. What happens if it rejects me? Minor magical backlash, nothing more, Ragnok assured him. The ring cannot harm one who was named heir by the previous head of house. Taking a deep breath, Harry picked up the black ring and placed it on the middle finger of his right hand. This time, the magic that surged through him was different, cooler, more assessing, as if something ancient was evaluating his worthiness. For a brief moment, Harry thought he heard Sirius's barking laugh echoing in his mind. Then the magic settled, and the ring adjusted to his finger. Remarkable, Ragnok murmured. The Black family magic has accepted you completely. You are now also Lord Black. Harry examined both rings on his hand, feeling oddly detached from the enormity of what was happening. Does this change anything about the lawsuit? It strengthens your position considerably, Ragnok confirmed. As head of 2 ancient and noble houses, you now hold significant political power. The Wisingamot cannot easily dismiss your claims. The goblin pulled another ledger forward. Now, we should review your complete holdings so you understand exactly what was taken from you and what remains. What followed was a dizzying inventory of assets that left Harry increasingly stunned. Beyond the 3.7 million galleons taken by Dumbledore, the Potter vault still contained over 20 million galleons in liquid assets, plus investments worth nearly twice that amount. The black fortune was similarly substantial, bringing his total net worth to well over 100 million galleons. I own companies? Harry asked incredulously as Ragnok detailed his investment portfolio. Controlling interests in several, Ragnok confirmed. Including a 30% stake in the Daily Prophet, ironically enough. Harry gave a sharp laugh. You're telling me I own part of the newspaper that spent last year dragging my name through the mud? Indeed. A fact Albus Dumbledore, as your magical guardian, was well aware of yet chose not to utilize on your behalf. The implications of that deliberate inaction hit Harry like a bludgeon to the chest. Dumbledore had let the prophet slander him for months when he could have intervened as a major shareholder. What about properties? Harry asked, his voice tight with suppressed anger. Ragnok produced a map that magically expanded across the desk, showing locations throughout Britain and beyond. The Potter family owns 7 properties, including Potter Manor in Wales, which has been sealed since your grandparents' deaths. The Black family holds 12 properties, including the London residence you're familiar with and a villa in the south of France. Harry stared at the map, at the little magical markers indicating homes he'd never known existed. I have a house. A family home that isn't Privet Drive or Godric's Hollow. Potter Manor remains intact and protected by family magic, Ragnok confirmed. According to our records, it was never compromised during the war. Your parents chose not to live there, preferring the cottage in Godric's Hollow for reasons not documented in our files. Can I go there? Harry asked, his voice suddenly small. To Potter Manor? As head of House Potter, you can access any Potter property immediately, Ragnok assured him. The Manor's wards will recognize your family ring. Harry nodded, trying to process everything. A house of his own. Places he could go that weren't the Dursleys or conditional stays with wizarding families. Financial independence. Legal emancipation. And all of it had been kept from him. For years. By people he trusted. I want to proceed with the lawsuit, he said firmly, looking Ragnok directly in the eyes. I want to sue Dumbledore for every Galleon he took, plus damages. What figure do you have in mind for damages? Ragnok asked, quill poised over parchment. Harry considered for a moment. The theft was 3.7 million. Let's sue for 5 million total. I don't care about the money, I apparently have plenty. I want it to hurt his reputation. I want everyone to know what he did. Ragnok's lips twitched in what might have been approval. A suitable figure. I believe we can expedite the filing before the Wizardgamot within the week. I want to hire the best solicitor available, Harry added. Someone who won't be intimidated by Dumbledore's reputation. I would recommend Andrios Katsaros, Ragnok said without hesitation. Half-blood, educated at Beauxbatons and Oxford. Specializes in high-profile financial litigation. He has successfully challenged ministry officials before and has no existing ties to Dumbledore or his associates. Can you contact him for me? Harry asked. I'd like to meet as soon as possible. I will send a message immediately, Ragnok agreed. Now, there is one more matter we must address, your living situation. As an emancipated minor and head of 2 houses, you are no longer required to reside with your Muggle relatives. Where do you intend to establish residence? The question caught Harry off guard. The possibility of never returning to Privet Drive was suddenly, tantalizingly real. I'd like to see Potter Manor, he decided. If it's habitable, I'll stay there. A suitable choice, Ragnok approved. The manor has been maintained by the Potter house elves in anticipation of your eventual claim. They will be most relieved to finally serve their master. I have house elves. Harry blinked. How many? The Potter family traditionally maintained a staff of 6, Ragnok informed him. The Black family has a similar number, although I cannot speak to their current condition given creatures' unique disposition. Harry nodded, thinking of the disturbed elf at Grimmauld Place. Can you arrange transportation to the manor today? I'd like to see it as soon as possible. Certainly. The Potter signet ring can be activated as a port key to the manor grounds. Ragnok demonstrated the required gesture, a quarter turn of the ring while saying, Domus Potter. One final recommendation, Mr. Potter, Ragnok said as he gathered the ledgers. Given what we've uncovered today, I strongly advise a complete medical examination by a neutral healer. Some of the withdrawals from your vaults were designated for medical expenses, yet our records show you've never filed medical claims through Gringotts as most magical families do. Harry frowned. More things kept from me? Potentially, Ragnok nodded. Gringotts can arrange an examination with a healer bound by both magical and goblin confidentiality oaths. It would be prudent to establish a baseline of your health before proceeding with legal action, particularly if there are additional improprieties to be discovered. The suggestion made uncomfortable sense. All right, Harry agreed. Can that be arranged today as well? It can. Healer Shafiq has worked with Gringotts clients for decades and maintains an office in Diagon Alley. I will send word to expect you this afternoon. Ragnok rose from his desk, signaling the end of their meeting. Mr. Potter, Lord Potterblack, formally, I believe this marks the beginning of significant changes for you. Gringotts stands ready to assist in safeguarding your inheritance and pursuing justice for the violations against your accounts. Harry stood as well, feeling oddly formal as he extended his hand. Thank you, Director Ragnok, for uncovering this and for helping me understand what was taken from me. Ragnok clasped Harry's hand briefly, an unusual gesture of respect from a goblin to a wizard. Gringotts values clients who value their gold, Lord Potterblack. May your enemies fall before you, and may your vaults never empty. And may your, enemies also do that falling thing, Harry attempted, earning what was definitely a smile from the intimidating goblin. Your diplomatic skills will develop with time, Ragnok observed dryly. Now, shall we proceed with the next steps of reclaiming your birthright? The healer's office was nothing like St. Mungo's. Where the wizarding hospital was chaotic and institutional, Healer Shafiq's private practice occupied a discreet townhouse off a quiet side street from Diagon Alley. The waiting room contained just 3 comfortable chairs, a small table with current periodicals, and absolutely no other patients. Harry had barely taken a seat when a door opened and a witch in her 50s emerged. She wore simple robes of deep blue rather than the lime green of St. Mungo's healers, and her silver-streaked black hair was pulled back in a practical braid. Lord Potterblack, she greeted him with a slight bow of her head. I am healer Yasmin Shafiq. Please, come in. Harry followed her into an examination room that was surprisingly comfortable, with a padded examination table, 2 chairs, and windows charmed to show a peaceful meadow scene despite being in the middle of London. Director Ragnok informed me you require a comprehensive health assessment, she said, gesturing for Harry to sit on the examination table. Before we begin, I must assure you of absolute confidentiality. I am bound by healer's oaths, goblin contract, and a magical non-disclosure agreement specific to your case. Thank you, Harry said, feeling awkward at the formality. I've never had a proper checkup in the wizarding world. Just visits to the hospital wing at Hogwarts when something went wrong. Healer Shafiq's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with interest. No annual examinations with the Hogwarts healer. No vaccination updates. No developmental monitoring. No, Harry admitted. Is that standard? For magical children, absolutely, she confirmed, making a note on a charmed clipboard. Particularly those from prominent families. The Potter heir should have received regular magical health screenings from infancy. The familiar feeling of having been denied something normal returned. Harry pushed it aside, focusing on the present. How does this work? The examination. I'll perform a series of diagnostic spells that will assess your physical health, magical core, and any lingering effects from past injuries or spells, she explained. The process is non-invasive but quite thorough. I'll need you to remove your outer robes and lie back on the table. Harry complied, feeling self-conscious in just his jeans and t-shirt as he reclined on the examination table. Healer Shafiq drew her wand, a slender, pale instrument, and began a complex series of movements while murmuring incantations in what sounded like Arabic. Ribbons of colored light emerged from her wand, wrapping around Harry's body like translucent bandages before sinking into his skin. The sensation was strange but not uncomfortable, a gentle warmth that seemed to flow through his veins and settle in his bones. As the diagnostic magic worked, a quill hovered over a piece of parchment on the nearby desk, recording findings in a flowing script. The examination continued for nearly 20 minutes, with Healer Shafiq occasionally pausing to study particular areas more closely: his scar, his right arm where the basilisk had bitten him, his left hand where Umbridge's quill had carved words into his skin. Finally, she stepped back, her expression carefully controlled as she studied the parchment filled with notes. "You may sit up, Lord Potterblack," she said, her voice deliberately neutral in a way that made Harry immediately wary. "Is something wrong?" he asked, pulling himself upright. Healer Shafiq took a seat in the chair beside the examination table, parchment in hand. "Let me be direct. Your medical condition presents a concerning pattern of untreated injuries, nutritional deficiencies, and magical interference. In my professional opinion, you have been subjected to prolonged medical neglect and possibly deliberate magical suppression." Harry stared at her. "What?" "Let's begin with the physical findings," she said, consulting her notes. "You show signs of childhood malnutrition severe enough to have permanently affected your growth. Multiple improperly healed fractures in your right arm, left wrist, and 3 ribs. Scar tissue consistent with untreated lacerations and contusions across your back and torso." She looked up, her dark eyes piercing. "These injuries are consistent with physical abuse, Lord Potterblack. Were you aware of this?" Harry shifted uncomfortably. "The Dursleys weren't kind. My cousin and his friends used to beat me up a lot when we were younger. My uncle would sometimes get rough when he was angry. But I didn't think it was that bad." "It was that bad, as you put it," she said firmly. "Had you received proper medical care at any point in your childhood, these injuries would have been documented and investigated." Harry shrugged, not wanting to dwell on the Dursleys. "What about magical suppression? What does that mean?" Healer Shafiq's expression grew even more serious. "Your magical core shows evidence of multiple binding spells, magic designed to limit or control the expression of your natural abilities. The oldest dates back to your infancy, likely placed when you were approximately 15 months old." After Voldemort attacked, Harry realized. Yes. This initial binding appears to have been modified and strengthened multiple times throughout your childhood, most recently within the past year. She hesitated before adding, "Such bindings are highly regulated and generally only used in cases where a child's magic presents a danger to themselves or others due to instability. They require ministry approval and regular monitoring by licensed healers." "Let me guess," Harry said bitterly. "No such approvals exist for me." "I would have to check ministry records to be certain, but given the pattern of concealment evident in your case, I think it unlikely." She set down the parchment. "There's more. You have traces of multiple memory charms, loyalty compulsions, and behavior modification spells. Most concerning is evidence of a foreign magical signature embedded in your curse scar, something I've never encountered before." Harry touched his scar reflexively. "Voldemort's magic? Possibly. It appears parasitic in nature, though currently dormant or contained." She frowned. "I would recommend bringing in a specialist in soul magic to examine it further." Harry felt oddly numb as he processed everything she was telling him. It was too much: physical abuse, magical bindings, compulsion spells, something living in his scar. How much of his life had actually been his own? "Can the bindings be removed?" he finally asked. "And the compulsions?" "Yes," Healer Shafiq said. "The process would need to be gradual for the core bindings. Removing them all at once could cause magical instability as your core adjusts. The compulsions can be broken immediately, though you may experience some emotional disorientation as their effects dissipate. Do it, Harry said without hesitation. All of it. I want everything that doesn't belong gone. Healer Shafiq studied him carefully. You understand this may have significant effects on your magic and your perception? Memories that were altered may return. Feelings you thought were natural may change. I understand, Harry confirmed. I need to know what's real. Who I really am without anyone else's influence. She nodded, seeming satisfied with his resolve. Very well. We'll begin with breaking the compulsion spells, as they're most straightforward. Please lie back and try to relax. This may be uncomfortable. Harry complied, closing his eyes as Healer Shafiq began another series of complex incantations. This time, the magic didn't feel gentle or warm, it burned through him like liquid fire, seeking out foreign magic buried deep within his mind and soul. Images flashed behind his eyelids, Dumbledore's twinkling eyes, Ron's jealous glare, Hermione's disapproving frown, Ginny's adoring gaze. Each image seemed to splinter and reform, revealing layers of meaning and motivation he'd never recognized before. Conversations replayed with new context, decisions he'd made seemed suddenly questionable. When the spell finally ended, Harry was drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. His head pounded as if it might split open, but beneath the pain was a clarity he'd never experienced before. How do you feel? Healer Shafiq asked, offering him a vial of pale blue potion. Harry accepted it gratefully, downing the contents in one gulp. The headache receded immediately, leaving behind that strange new clarity. Different, he answered honestly. Like I've been looking at everything through foggy glasses and someone just cleaned them properly. He sat up slowly. I keep thinking about Dumbledore and feeling angry instead of respectful. Is that normal? Completely, she assured him. The compulsions I removed included loyalty bindings keyed specifically to Albus Dumbledore, as well as friendship compulsions linked to Ronald Weasley and Hermione Granger, and a mild attraction compulsion connected to Ginevra Weasley. Harry felt his stomach turn. Someone magically made me like my friends? And have feelings for Ginny? The compulsions wouldn't have created feelings that weren't possible, Healer Shafiq explained gently. They merely amplified natural inclinations while suppressing doubts or concerns. Your friendships may well be genuine at their core, but they've been magically reinforced and directed. Harry wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. Had any of his relationships been entirely his choice? The next step would be to begin removing the core bindings, Healer Shafiq continued. As I mentioned, this needs to be done gradually. I recommend 3 sessions over the course of 2 weeks to safely release your full magical potential. When can we start? We can perform the first unbinding today, she said. But I must warn you, as your magic begins to flow more freely, you may experience periods of instability. Random surges, accidental magic, heightened emotional responses triggering magical effects. It's similar to what magical children experience before learning control, but potentially more powerful given your age and natural strength. Harry nodded his understanding. I'll be careful. The process of removing the first layer of bindings proved even more intense than breaking the compulsions. Healer Shafiq worked methodically, carefully unraveling strands of restrictive magic that had been woven through Harry's core since infancy. The sensation was like chains being unlocked, one link at a time, each release sending a pulse of raw magic coursing through his body. When it was finally complete, Harry lay trembling on the examination table, his skin tingling with power that seemed to dance just beneath the surface. The room's lights flickered, and small objects vibrated on nearby surfaces. Breathe deeply, Healer Shafiq instructed, her voice calm and steady. Visualize your magic as water flowing through a river, contained but powerful, directed but free. Harry focused on her words, imagining his magic settling into natural channels rather than bursting randomly from him. Gradually, the tingling subsided, and the objects around the room stilled. Good, she approved. Very good control for a first unbinding. It feels. Harry searched for words. Alive. Like I've been half asleep my whole life. An apt description, she smiled slightly. Magic responds to intent and emotion. As yours becomes less restricted, you'll find both your conscious and unconscious magical abilities significantly enhanced. She handed him another potion, this one a deep purple. This will help stabilize your core as it adjusts. Take one dose before sleep tonight and another upon waking. Harry accepted the vial, tucking it carefully into his pocket. Thank you for all of this. I've documented all findings and treatments, Healer Shafiq said, her professional manner returning. Copies will be provided to both you and Gringotts for your legal proceedings. I believe my findings constitute significant evidence of guardianship malfeasance. You mean they proved Dumbledore wasn't looking out for my best interests, Harry translated grimly. That would be a charitable interpretation, she agreed. A more direct one would be that someone deliberately kept you physically weakened, magically suppressed, and emotionally manipulated throughout your formative years. The blunt assessment hit Harry like a physical blow, but he found he couldn't disagree with it. Everything he'd learned today painted a picture of systematic control rather than protection. Rest tonight, Healer Shafiq advised as she handed him a port key for his return appointment. Allow your magic to settle into its new patterns. And perhaps most importantly, trust your own judgment. Without the compulsions clouding your perceptions, you may find your instincts about people and situations more reliable than they've ever been. Potter Manor existed in a place between places. The portkey activation from Harry's family ring deposited him at the end of a long, tree-lined drive that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Behind him, a wrought iron gate bearing the Potter crest stood open in welcome, though Harry could see nothing but mist beyond it. Ahead, the drive wound through immaculately kept grounds toward a house that made Harry's breath catch in his throat. It wasn't a manor so much as a small castle, a three-story structure of honey-colored stone with multiple wings, turrets, and a central entrance flanked by columns. Ivy climbed portions of the walls, giving it a lived-in feel despite its grandeur. Flower gardens bloomed on either side of the drive, their colors vibrant against the emerald grass. As Harry approached, still dazed by the sight of his family home, the massive oak doors swung open. 6 house elves appeared in the entrance hall, all dressed in neat uniforms of deep burgundy with the Potter crest embroidered in gold. They lined up in order of height and bowed deeply in perfect unison. Master Harry Potter has come home at last, the eldest elf proclaimed, his voice quavering with emotion. Pippi and the Potter elves welcomed the last Potter to his ancestral home. Harry stopped at the foot of the entrance steps, overwhelmed. Hello, he managed, feeling completely out of his depth. I didn't know this place existed until today. Pippi, the elderly elf who had spoken, straightened with an expression of distress. Master Harry was not told of his home. Who has kept Master Harry from his birthright? It's complicated, Harry said, not wanting to delve into the whole Dumbledore situation immediately. But I'm here now. I'd like to stay, if that's all right. This statement caused a flurry of excitement among the elves, who immediately began speaking over one another in their eagerness to serve. Master's rooms are ready. Dinner can be served at 6. Does Master wish a tour of the grounds? Master's clothes must be unpacked. Harry held up his hands, and they fell silent instantly. One thing at a time, please. I don't actually have any luggage, everything I own is at my relative's house or at Hogwarts. He hesitated before adding, and I don't really know how any of this works. I've never had, well, a proper home before. Pippi stepped forward, his large eyes filled with determination. Then Pippi will explain everything to Master Harry. Potter Manor has been waiting for the last Potter to return. The manor has been kept ready, all these years. Who ordered you to maintain it? Harry asked, curious. If no one from my family has been here since my grandparents. We is bound to the Potter family magic, explained a younger female elf. We serves the house itself when no Potter is in residence. The magic sustains us, and we sustains the magic. It is being the old way. Harry nodded, still trying to process everything. Could I see inside? I'd like to learn about my family. Of course. Pippi clapped his hands, and the other elves dispersed, presumably to prepare for Harry's residence. Pippi will show Master Harry his home. The manor has 16 bedchambers, a library with 3,000 books, a potions laboratory, a dueling room, formal dining and reception rooms, and the Potter family vault room where heirlooms not kept at Gringotts are stored. As Pippi led him through the entrance hall into the heart of the manor, Harry felt a strange sensation, as if the house itself were welcoming him, wrapping around him like an embrace. The air seemed to vibrate with subtle magic, and portraits on the walls stirred as he passed, whispering to each other excitedly. The family portraits! Harry exclaimed, stopping to examine the nearest one, a stern-looking wizard with Harry's unruly black hair, dressed in 18th-century clothing. Can they talk to me? Can I learn about my family from them? Indeed, Master Harry, Pippi confirmed. The portraits in the main gallery contain 7 generations of Potters. They has been waiting most anxiously to meet you. Harry barely heard the rest of Pippi's tour as they proceeded through the manor. His mind was spinning with possibilities. A home of his own. House elves to help him. Family portraits that could tell him about his heritage. Books and artifacts that belonged to his ancestors. Independence from the Dursleys, from Dumbledore, from everyone who had lied to and manipulated him. And above all, the growing anger that all of this birthright, this knowledge, this connection to his family, had been deliberately kept from him. They reached what Pippi described as the Lord's study, a handsome room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk of polished mahogany. The walls were adorned with more portraits, these more recent than those in the hall. Is that, Harry began, his voice failing as he spotted a familiar face. Master James and Mistress Lily, Pippi confirmed softly. Their portrait was commissioned upon their marriage. It is not. Fully awakened, as they did not sit for the magical infusion before their passing. But there is some echo of them within. Harry approached the portrait with trembling steps. His parents sat together on a garden bench, his father's arm around his mother's shoulders. They looked so young, barely older than Harry was now. As he drew near, they stirred slightly, as if emerging from a deep sleep. Hello. James Potter's portrait said, his voice distant and somewhat confused. You seem familiar. You look like James, Lily's portrait observed, her painted green eyes studying him intently. But you have my eyes. I'm Harry, he told them, his throat tight with emotion. Your son. The portraits exchanged bewildered looks. Our son would be a baby, James said uncertainly. It's been 15 years since you died, Harry explained gently. I'm 16 now. The portraits seemed to struggle with this information, their expressions flickering between confusion and sorrow. We're sorry, Lily's portrait finally said. We're not fully conscious portraits. We can't remember things we didn't know when we were painted. We don't know you as you are now, James added regretfully. Though I'd wager you're a fine young man. Harry swallowed hard, disappointment warring with the simple joy of seeing their faces, hearing their voices. That's all right. It's just good to see you. He turned away, wiping discreetly at his eyes, and found himself facing another portrait, an older couple who watched him with unmistakable interest. You must be our grandson, the woman said warmly. Her hair was dark with silver streaks, styled in an elegant twist, and her eyes were the same hazel as James's had been. I am Euphemia Potter, and this is my husband, Fleamont. Harry Potter, he introduced himself, oddly formal in the face of grandparents he'd never known he had. It's good to meet you. The pleasure is ours, Fleamont replied, his voice deep and cultured. Unlike the echo-like quality of his parents' incomplete portrait, his grandfather's presence felt solid and complete. Though I must ask, why have you not visited until now? You must be, 16? I didn't know this place existed, Harry admitted. No one ever told me about Potter Manor, or about you, or about any of my inheritance. I only found out today, when Gringotts summoned me about irregularities in my accounts. His grandparents' portraits exchanged alarmed glances. "Who has been your guardian?" Euphemia demanded. "Surely they would have brought you here, taught you about your heritage." "I was raised by my mother's sister and her husband," Harry explained. "Muggles. They weren't fond of magic. And my magical guardian was apparently Albus Dumbledore, though he never actually told me that." Fleamont's portrait frowned deeply. "Petunia Evans. That spiteful girl raised our grandson. And Albus kept you from your birthright? There must be some mistake." "There was definitely a mistake," Harry agreed grimly. "About 3.7 million galleons worth of mistakes, according to Gringotts' audit. Dumbledore has been helping himself to the Potter vaults since the night my parents died." The portrait of Fleamont Potter went so still he might have been a Muggle painting. When he spoke again, his voice was cold with controlled fury. "Explain." So Harry did. He told his grandparents' portraits everything he'd learned that day, the unauthorized withdrawals, the suppressed inheritance, the medical findings of bindings and compulsions. As he spoke, other portraits gathered in neighboring frames, the assembled Potter ancestors listening with growing outrage. When he finished, the study was silent for a long moment before Euphemia's portrait spoke, her voice tight with restrained anger. "You were right to seek legal remedy, Harry. What has been done to you, to our family, is unconscionable. The Potter family has stood for justice and integrity for 900 years, Fleamont added gravely. We have never been pawns in another's game. That ends now." A fierce sense of belonging swept through Harry. Here, in this room surrounded by the faces of his ancestors, he felt connected to something larger than himself, a legacy of which he was now the sole living guardian. "I don't know much about being Lord Potter," he admitted. "Or about wizarding law, or politics, or any of it. But I'm going to learn. And I'm going to make this right. The Potter family library contains journals from every head of house dating back centuries," Fleamont informed him. "Begin there. And know that while we are but paint and memory, we stand ready to advise you as best we can." Harry nodded, resolution hardening within him. "I'm meeting with a solicitor tomorrow to formalize the lawsuit. 5 million galleons for theft and breach of fiduciary duty. A suitable opening position," Fleamont approved. "Though the true value of what was taken from you cannot be measured in galleons alone." "I know," Harry agreed quietly. "But it's a start. And it will show everyone exactly who Albus Dumbledore really is." As if summoned by the name, a house elf appeared with a soft pop. "Master Harry, sir. An urgent owl has arrived from Hogwarts. The letter bears the seal of the headmaster." Harry exchanged looks with his grandparents' portraits before accepting the letter. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakably Dumbledore's, as was the purple wax seal bearing the Hogwarts crest rather than his personal one. Breaking the seal, Harry unfolded the parchment. "Dear Harry, it has come to my attention that you have left the protection of your relatives' home, placing yourself in grave danger. I must insist you return immediately, for your own safety. Furthermore, I have received concerning reports of unusual activity regarding your Gringotts accounts. I assure you there is a reasonable explanation for everything, which I will be happy to discuss when we meet. Please respond immediately with your location so that Order members may escort you to safety. Yours in concern, Albus Dumbledore." Harry read the letter twice, noting what wasn't said as much as what was. No mention of the illegal withdrawals. No acknowledgement of Harry's inheritance or emancipation. Just the same paternalistic control masked as concern. "He knows," Harry said, looking up at the portraits. "Gringotts must have frozen his access to my vaults." "What will you do?" Euphemia asked. Harry considered the letter for a moment before reaching for a quill and parchment from the desk. His response was brief: "Professor Dumbledore, I am perfectly safe at Potter Manor, my family home that I was never told existed. As for my Gringotts accounts, I believe my solicitor will be in touch regarding the 3.7 million galleons you've illegally withdrawn over the past 15 years. Do not attempt to contact me directly again. Harry Potter, Lord of the Ancient and Noble Houses of Potter and Black. He sealed it with his Potter ring, the wax imprinting with the family crest, and handed it to the waiting elf. Please have this sent immediately. As the elf disappeared with the letter, Harry turned back to his grandparents' portraits. And so it begins. Indeed, Fleamont nodded solemnly. Welcome home, Lord Potter. The game is afoot. Chapter 2, Broken Pedestals. The Daily Prophet's headline appeared mere hours after Harry sent his response to Dumbledore. Boy WHO lived sues Dumbledore for millions. Potter claims headmaster stole family fortune. Harry stared at the front page spread across the breakfast table, a piece of toast forgotten halfway to his mouth. The article beneath the glaring headline contained details he'd shared with no one outside Gringotts. Someone leaked this, he muttered, scanning the byline. Not Rita Skeeter this time, but a reporter he'd never heard of, Elias Thornberry, special financial correspondent. The Prophet has always been quick to sensationalize, remarked Fleamont's portrait, which had been moved to the breakfast room at Harry's request. Though in this case, they seem surprisingly accurate in the particulars. Harry nodded, returning to the article. In a shocking development that has rocked the wizarding establishment, Harry Potter, 16, has filed a lawsuit against Albus Dumbledore, claiming the venerated Hogwarts headmaster illegally withdrew 3.7 million galleons from the Potter family vaults over 15 years. According to court documents filed yesterday with the Wizengamot, Dumbledore presented himself as Potter's magical guardian following the death of James and Lily Potter in 1981, using this position to access the substantial Potter fortune without oversight. This is the most significant case of financial malfeasance I've seen in 30 years of practice, said Andrios Katsaros, the high-profile solicitor representing Potter. We have documented evidence of systematic theft disguised as guardianship. The lawsuit seeks restitution of all withdrawn funds plus 1.3 million galleons in punitive damages, for a total claim of 5 million galleons. Sources close to the case report that Potter has claimed his hereditary titles as Lord of the Ancient and Noble Houses of Potter and Black, effectively emancipating him under wizarding law. Dumbledore, who serves as Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, and Headmaster of Hogwarts, has not responded to requests for comment. The article continued with speculation about the impact on Dumbledore's reputation and position, along with reactions from various ministry officials expressing either shock or skepticism. Cornelius Fudge was quoted calling the lawsuit a desperate bid for attention from a troubled young man, while Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, had offered a more measured response about taking all allegations of financial impropriety seriously, regardless of who is involved. Well, that was fast, Harry commented, folding the paper. I only sent the paperwork to Mr. Katsaros yesterday afternoon. Financial scandals sell papers, Fleamont observed. Particularly when they involve the two most famous wizards in Britain. Harry was still getting used to the idea of having ancestors to talk to. His grandfather's portrait had proven to be a fountain of knowledge about wizarding politics and Potter family history, offering insights Harry had never had access to before. A soft pop announced the arrival of Pippi, who bowed before presenting Harry with a silver tray bearing several envelopes. The morning post has arrived, Master Harry, the elderly elf announced. Pippi has checked all items for harmful magic or potions, as is proper. Thank you, Pippi, Harry said, accepting the tray. The stack of correspondence was alarmingly thick. Is this normal? After today's prophet? I'd say it's rather light, Fleamont commented dryly. I suggest having your elves sort your mail. Personal correspondence from known contacts first, followed by official communications, with general public letters screened and summarized. Harry nodded, overwhelmed again by how much he didn't know about living as the head of a prominent family. Pippi, could you organize that system for my mail? Of course, Master Harry. Pippi will arrange immediately. The elf's chest puffed with pride at being entrusted with such an important task. Harry returned his attention to the current stack, sorting through envelopes with familiar handwriting. The first was from Hermione, her neat, precise script unmistakable. The second bore Ron's hasty scrawl. Additional letters came from Neville, Luna, and, surprisingly, Fred and George Weasley. There were several official-looking documents bearing ministry seals, plus a cream-colored envelope embossed with the Gringotts crest. He opened Hermione's letter first, curious how she'd react to the news. "Harry, I can't believe what I'm reading in the Prophet. Is it true? Are you really suing Professor Dumbledore? And did you really inherit 2 lordships? I have so many questions, but first, I need to know if you're safe. Ron says his parents are frantic because Dumbledore told the Order you've disappeared and might be under some kind of curse or compulsion. Mrs. Weasley is convinced you've been kidnapped or imperiused. Please let me know you're okay and what's really happening. I'm worried about you, and this whole situation seems incredibly dangerous. You know how powerful Dumbledore is, are you sure this is wise? I'm at home with my parents for now, but ready to help however I can. Right back soon." Hermione. Harry frowned, detecting the familiar pattern of Hermione's loyalty to authority figures conflicting with her concern for him. He set her letter aside and opened Ron's. "Harry, bloody hell mate. What's going on? Mum's having kittens over the Prophet story, and Dad came home from work early yesterday looking really stressed. Dumbledore's been here twice asking if we've heard from you. Is it true about the money? And about Dumbledore being your guardian? Mum keeps saying it must be some kind of mistake or misunderstanding. Also, there's something weird going on with our family. Dad and Mum had a massive row behind silencing charms last night, but I heard bits about the Potter arrangement and we had no choice. I don't know what to think, but I hope you're okay. Right back, yeah. Ron. P.S. Ginny's been crying since the news broke. No idea why." Harry's frown deepened as he set Ron's letter with Hermione's. The reference to the Potter arrangement confirmed his suspicion that the Weasleys had known at least something about Dumbledore's financial manipulations. The thought sent a fresh wave of betrayal through him. "Not looking good?" Fleamont inquired, noting Harry's expression. "My friends seem more concerned about Dumbledore than about me," Harry replied, the hurt evident in his voice despite his attempt to sound matter-of-fact. "Loyalty is tested in times of conflict," Fleamont observed. "True friends align themselves with people, not positions of power." Harry nodded, reaching for Neville's letter next. "Harry, Gran says the Potters have finally remembered their backbone. She's absolutely thrilled about the lawsuit and says it's about bloody time someone called that manipulative old goat to account. Her words, not mine. Are you really Lord Potterblack now? That's brilliant. Gran says you should accept our formal alliance renewal. Apparently the Longbottoms and Potters have been allied families for centuries. I don't understand everything that's happening, but if Dumbledore really took your inheritance and kept you from your family legacy, then he deserves whatever's coming to him. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Gran's politically connected and says our family stands with yours, as it has been since the days of Linfred of Stinchcombe. No idea who that is, but she seemed impressed I'm friends with his descendant. Neville Longbottom, heir to the ancient and noble house of Longbottom. Harry felt a smile spread across his face as he finished Neville's letter. The straightforward support was exactly what he needed. He made a mental note to ask Fleamont about renewing the alliance with the Longbottoms. Luna's letter was characteristically unique. Dear Harry, the Raxburts around Dumbledore's head have been visible for years, but no one else seemed to notice. I'm glad you've finally seen them too. Daddy is preparing a special edition of the Quibbler about your case. He says the Prophet will inevitably twist things to protect the establishment, so we should present the unvarnished truth. Would you consider giving us an exclusive interview? We promise no quick quotes, quills or misleading edits. You should know that breaking free of Nargle influence often makes one feel temporarily unbalanced. This is normal. Your true self is simply adjusting to clarity after years of buzzing interference. Your friend, Luna Lovegood. P.S. Daddy says if you need a place to stay that's unplottable and protected against mind-altering creatures, our home is open to you. Harry chuckled, appreciating Luna's unique perspective and the genuine offer of help buried beneath her whimsical language. The twins' letter was next. Harry, first things first, we had no idea where the money for Weasley's wizard wheezes really came from. We thought your Triwizard winnings were just that, yours to give. If we'd known you were bankrolling us with money that wasn't actually yours to control, we'd never have accepted. That said, we're not returning the investment because it's already been spent on what is now a thriving business. Instead, we've drawn up proper paperwork making you a full one-third partner in WWW, with all appropriate profit shares to be deposited directly to your account. Also, we've officially filed to break from the Weasley family and establish ourselves as independent business wizards. Don't worry, it's not entirely because of your situation. We've been planning this since the shop took off, but the timing seemed right given recent revelations. Whatever the truth is about Dumbledore's actions, you deserve to know what happened to your family's money. Count us firmly in your corner. Your business partners, officially now, Fred and George, formerly of Weasley, now just Gred and Forge, entrepreneurs extraordinaire. Harry set the twins' letter aside thoughtfully. Their response was more mature than he'd expected, and their willingness to formalize his investment showed both business sense and loyalty. He made another mental note to visit their shop once the initial chaos of the lawsuit died down. The remaining letters would have to wait, as the fireplace in the breakfast room suddenly flared green. A moment later, a tall man with olive skin and close-cropped salt and pepper hair stepped elegantly through the flames. He wore immaculate charcoal robes with subtle silver embroidery at the cuffs and collar, and carried a sleek leather briefcase. Lord Potterblack, he greeted Harry with a slight bow. Andrios Katsaros. I apologize for the early arrival, but events are moving quickly. Harry stood, offering his hand. Mr. Katsaros. Thank you for coming. And thank you for taking my case. It is both my pleasure and my professional duty, Katsaros replied, his accent faintly Mediterranean but his English flawless. His handshake was firm and brief. The integrity of magical guardianship is fundamental to our legal system. Its abuse cannot stand unchallenged. Pippi appeared with another place setting and fresh tea. Katsaros accepted both with a polite nod to the elf before turning his attention back to Harry. I see you've read this morning's Prophet, he observed, gesturing to the newspaper. I must apologize, the leak did not come from my office. Gringotts suspects someone in the court filing office, though proving it will be difficult. It's fine, Harry said with a shrug. It was going to become public anyway. At least the article seems mostly accurate. Indeed. Small mercies. Katsaros opened his briefcase, withdrawing several folders. We have much to discuss. The Wisingamot has scheduled a preliminary hearing for next Tuesday, unusually quick, which suggests someone is pushing for rapid resolution. Dumbledore? Harry guessed. Perhaps, Katsaros acknowledged. Or perhaps those who wish to see him fall. The political landscape is shifting rapidly in response to your lawsuit. Old alliances are being reconsidered, new opportunities perceived. Harry frowned. I didn't file this lawsuit for political gain. I just want the truth known and what's mine returned. A simple motive that will nonetheless have complex consequences, Katsaros observed. Albus Dumbledore has stood at the center of British magical power for over 50 years. Challenging him threatens to destabilize the entire political establishment, something many parties find either terrifying or exhilarating, depending on their position. What's our strategy for the hearing? Harry asked, eager to focus on practical matters. Direct and unambiguous, Katsaros replied, opening one of his folders. We present the documented evidence of unauthorized withdrawals, establish the absence of proper guardianship documentation, and demonstrate the pattern of deliberate concealment of your inheritance. The legal case itself is straightforward, the political and public reaction is what makes this complex. He laid out several documents on the table. These are Dumbledore's first formal responses to the lawsuit. As expected, he claims all withdrawals were made for your benefit and protection, citing the exceptional circumstances of your status as the boy who lived and the ongoing threat from the Dark Lord's followers. Harry scanned the documents, his jaw tightening at Dumbledore's familiar pattern of justification. He's still playing the greater good card, then. Indeed. His primary defense appears to be that he acted in your best interest under extraordinary circumstances that required unorthodox measures. Katsurosa's tone remained professional, but Harry detected a hint of disdain. He also claims that maintaining secrecy around your inheritance was necessary to prevent it falling into the wrong hands. And the payments to the Dursleys? To the Weasleys? To his own personal account? Harry challenged. For those, he offers specific justifications, Katsuros continued, flipping to another page. The Dursley payments were supposedly for your care and maintenance. The Weasley payments are characterized as security arrangements for a family willing to provide you protection and companionship. His personal withdrawals are claimed as administrative fees for managing your estate and security. Harry felt his temper flaring. That's rubbish. The Dursleys never spent a penny on me if they could help it. And the Weasleys were paid to be my friends? That is for the Wizengamot to determine, Katsuros said carefully. Though I would caution against assuming the Weasley family fully understood the arrangement. It's quite possible Dumbledore presented the funds as a stipend for Order members or as compensation for increased risk due to their association with you. Harry nodded reluctantly, remembering Ron's letter about his parents arguing over the Potter arrangement. What about my medical examination results? He asked. The bindings on my magic, the compulsions, the evidence of childhood neglect. Healer Shafiq's report has been entered into evidence, Katsuros confirmed. It represents some of our strongest material, particularly the documented magical suppressions, which have no legitimate justification when placed on a minor without ministry approval and regular monitoring. He pulled out another document. Dumbledore's team will attempt to exclude this evidence as irrelevant to the financial case, but I believe we can successfully argue that it demonstrates a pattern of control and manipulation consistent with the financial misconduct. His team? Harry repeated. Who's representing him? He has retained Elphia's Doge as his primary counsel, with Tiberius Ogden providing additional support, Katsuros replied. Both are longtime associates and Wizengamot members. Not the most aggressive litigators, but they carry significant weight due to their positions. Harry vaguely remembered Doge as an elderly wizard who had been mentioned as one of Dumbledore's oldest friends. Are they good? They are respected, Katsuros answered diplomatically. But they are not specialists in fiduciary law. I suspect Dumbledore selected them for their loyalty rather than their expertise in this particular area of jurisprudence. He closed the folder and regarded Harry seriously. Now, we must discuss your public appearance at the hearing. As you've seen from this morning's prophet, your every move will be scrutinized. Your demeanor, your clothing, your words, all will be interpreted and reinterpreted through various political lenses. Harry sighed, all too familiar with media scrutiny. What do you recommend? Dignity without arrogance. Confidence without aggression. You must present yourself as Lord Potterblack, a young man who has discovered a betrayal and seeks justice, not revenge. Fleamont's portrait cleared his throat. If I might offer a suggestion. The Potter family vaults contain traditional Wizengamot robes that would be appropriate for the hearing. They convey respect for tradition while asserting Harry's rightful place in wizarding society. Katsuros glanced at the portrait, his expression revealing mild surprise. Lord Fleamont Potter, I presume. Your suggestion has merit. Traditional family robes would send a powerful message about Lord Potterblack reclaiming his heritage. Pippi can retrieve the robes from the vault and ensure they're properly fitted, Harry decided. What about my statement? Will I need to speak at the hearing? Briefly, Katsuros confirmed. You will be asked to confirm your claim and may face limited questioning. I will handle most of the legal argumentation, but you should be prepared to articulate your feelings about discovering the unauthorized withdrawals and the concealment of your inheritance. Should I mention the medical findings? The bindings and compulsions? Katsuros considered the question carefully. Only if directly asked. Those elements are powerful but delicate. Presented incorrectly, they could appear as an attempt to garner sympathy rather than establish legal wrongdoing. We want to focus on the documented financial misconduct first, using the medical evidence to support our characterization of Dumbledore's intentions. Harry nodded his understanding. What about Voldemort? Dumbledore will surely claim everything he did was to protect me from the Death Eaters. Indeed, and that defense cannot be entirely dismissed, Katsuros acknowledged. However, we can demonstrate that protection does not require theft, nor does security demand complete ignorance of one's inheritance. Many prominent families have children who face various threats, yet they manage their security without surrendering their birthright or financial autonomy. A soft chime interrupted their conversation as the study door opened to admit another house elf. Master Harry, sir, the elf announced with a deep bow. Visitors are arriving at the main gate. The wards identify them as Miss Hermione Granger and Mr. Ronald Weasley. Harry stiffened, exchanging a glance with Katsuros. How did they find Potter Manor? It's supposed to be unplottable. If they were previously here, they might remember, Katsuros began. They've never been here, Harry cut him off. No one has. I only discovered it existed myself 2 days ago. Katsuros's expression darkened. Then someone has guided them. Someone who knew the location. Dumbledore, Harry concluded grimly. He sent my friends to persuade me. It would be consistent with his approach thus far, Katsuros agreed. Using existing emotional connections to influence you. Harry considered his options. Part of him wanted to see Ron and Hermione, to explain everything face to face. Yet another part, the part that had spent hours reviewing the evidence of Dumbledore's manipulations, felt wary. I don't think I'm ready to see them yet, he decided. Not until I understand their involvement. A prudent choice, Katsuros approved. May I suggest an alternative? Allow me to meet with them briefly. I can explain that you are engaged in legal preparations and cannot be disturbed, while assessing their intentions. Harry hesitated before nodding. All right, but please make it clear I'm not avoiding them permanently. I just need time. Of course. Katsuros rose smoothly. I shall be diplomatic but firm. In the meantime, perhaps you could review the affidavits we've prepared for your signature. They formalize your claims for the court record. After Katsuros left to intercept Ron and Hermione, Harry turned to Fleamont's portrait. Was I wrong to refuse to see them? Not at all, his grandfather assured him. In uncertain times, caution is wisdom, not cowardice. Your friends may be entirely innocent of Dumbledore's manipulations, but they may also be unwitting pawns in his response strategy. Better to establish your position firmly before engaging. Harry nodded, focusing on the legal documents Katsuros had left. The formal language of wizarding law was dense but not impenetrable, detailing the specific claims against Dumbledore in precise terms. Harry signed each affidavit, his newly practiced signature, Harry James Potterblack, growing more confident with each repetition. Katsuros returned some 20 minutes later, his expression carefully neutral. Your friends have departed, he reported. They were disappointed not to see you, but understood the necessity of your legal preparations. How did they seem? Harry asked, unable to keep the concern from his voice. Were they angry? Miss Granger was primarily concerned for your welfare, Katsuros replied carefully. She expressed skepticism about the lawsuit, suggesting there must be some explanation for Dumbledore's actions that would vindicate him. Mr. Weasley was more conflicted, worried about you, but also distinctly uncomfortable about the financial aspects of the case. Did they say how they found the manor? They claimed Professor McGonagall provided the location, saying only that she thought you might need your friends during this difficult time. Katsurosa's tone suggested he found this explanation incomplete at best. McGonagall, Harry repeated thoughtfully. Not Dumbledore directly. A more palatable messenger, Katsuro suggested. Though the strategy remains the same, deploying emotional connections to influence your course of action. Harry sighed, setting aside the signed documents. I'll write to them both tonight, explaining things properly. They deserve that much. A reasonable approach, Katsuros agreed. Now, let us return to our preparation. The preliminary hearing will set the tone for the entire proceeding. We must ensure you are thoroughly prepared. The remainder of the morning was spent in detailed discussion of wizarding legal procedures, potential questions Harry might face, and the likely counter-strategies Dumbledore's team would employ. By lunchtime, Harry's head was swimming with legal terms and procedural rules. Take the afternoon to rest, Katsuros advised as he repacked his briefcase. Review the family journals your grandfather mentioned. Understanding your heritage will strengthen your position. I'll return tomorrow to continue our preparation. After Katsuros departed, Harry retreated to the Potter family library, a magnificent two-story room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, comfortable reading nooks, and large windows overlooking the gardens. The family journals occupied a special section, organized chronologically from the 12th century to his father's brief tenure as Lord Potter. He selected his father's journal first, settling into a worn leather armchair that seemed to embrace him perfectly. The book's cover bore the Potter crest stamped in gold, with James Fleamont Potter, 1978 to 1981, inscribed beneath. Opening to the first page, Harry found himself looking at handwriting startlingly similar to his own, slightly messy but legible, with dramatic flourishes on capital letters. March 27, 1978. Today I became Lord Potter, though I still feel like just James. Dad says that's normal, that the weight of the title settles gradually rather than all at once. It's strange knowing I'm now responsible for the family legacy, especially with the war worsening daily. Lily says I'm overthinking it, that being Lord Potter doesn't mean I have to suddenly become stuffy and formal. She's right, as usual. Sirius made predictable jokes about having to bow and call me, my lord, then proceeded to do exactly that in increasingly ridiculous ways throughout dinner. Remus at least had the decency to look embarrassed on my behalf. Dad's health continues to decline. The healers say the dragon pox has progressed too far for conventional treatments. Mum refuses to leave his side, despite the risk of contagion. Their devotion to each other remains my model for what marriage should be. Harry read on, hungry for glimpses of his parents' lives through his father's eyes. The journal entries painted a picture of a young man thrust into responsibility during wartime, balancing family obligations with active resistance against Voldemort. Several entries mentioned disagreements with Dumbledore over Order of the Phoenix strategy, with James advocating for more aggressive action while Dumbledore counseled patience and restraint. The tone grew increasingly frustrated as 1979 progressed. July 15, 1979. Another Order meeting, another circular discussion that accomplished nothing. Dumbledore continues to hold information close, revealing only what he deems necessary for each assignment. Lily calls it compartmentalization, I call it controlling. Moody sides with me, says you can't fight effectively if you don't understand the larger strategy. But most defer to Albus without question, treating his every suggestion as divine wisdom. I've committed the Potter family's resources to this fight, but I'm increasingly concerned about how they're being utilized. When I questioned the distribution of funds yesterday, Albus looked at me with that damn twinkle and said, "My dear boy, surely you trust that I'm allocating resources where they're most needed?" The problem is, I don't know if I do trust that anymore. The Potter wealth isn't unlimited, and I have a responsibility to future generations, to my children and their children, to preserve what my ancestors built. Lily is pregnant. We confirmed it with a healer today. I haven't told anyone in the Order yet, not even Sirius. In these dangerous times, such joy feels almost forbidden, yet it's precisely what we're fighting for, the future, our children's future. I will not let Albus Dumbledore's caution condemn my child to grow up in a world ruled by Voldemort. One way or another, this war must end. Harry paused, his throat tight with emotion. His father had been questioning Dumbledore's methods even before Harry was born. The realization that James Potter might have understood Dumbledore's manipulative tendencies, might have stood against them had he lived, felt somehow vindicating. He continued reading, finding entries about his mother's pregnancy, preparations for his birth, and the growing danger as Voldemort's forces gained strength. The tone grew darker as 1980 progressed, with increasing references to security concerns and protective measures. Then, an entry that made Harry's breath catch: August 2, 1980. My son was born yesterday. Harry James Potter, named for Lily's father and myself. He's perfect, Lily's eyes, my hair, poor lad, and the strongest magical aura the midwife says she's seen in a newborn in decades. We've performed the traditional Potter family blessing ritual. Mother insisted, despite her weakened condition. The family magic responded powerfully to Harry. All the portraits agree he'll be a formidable wizard someday. Dumbledore visited today, ostensibly to congratulate us, but something about his interest in Harry unsettled me. The way he examined him, tested his magical response, it felt like assessment rather than admiration. He mentioned a prophecy, vague references only, nothing specific, but enough to suggest Harry might have some predetermined role in the war. I cut him off before he could elaborate. My son is 3 days old. He will not be conscripted into Dumbledore's chess match against Voldemort before he can even hold his head up. I've accelerated the security upgrades at Potter Manor. The Fidelius charm on the Godric's Hollow Cottage will be cast next week, with Sirius as secret keeper. Lily has researched additional protective enchantments based on ancient blood magic, controversial, but potentially powerful enough to shield Harry even from Voldemort himself if it comes to that. I've updated my will as well. In the event of both our deaths, Harry's guardianship is to pass to Sirius, with Remus, Alice and Frank, or Minerva as alternatives in that order. Under no circumstances is Harry to be placed with Lily's sister Petunia and her husband. Lily was adamant about this, and I agree completely. That home would be no place for a magical child, especially one with Harry's potential. I've instructed the goblins to seal all Potter vaults except the Trust Vault in case of our deaths, with access restrictions that only Harry can lift upon claiming his lordship. Albus offered to assist with financial arrangements for Harry's future, but I declined. The Potter wealth is for Potter heirs, not order operations, no matter how worthy the cause. When I look at my son's face, I understand what truly matters. Politics, power, even principles, all pale beside the simple truth that I would burn the world to keep him safe. Is this what it means to be a father? This fierce, terrifying love? Harry closed the journal, unable to read further through the tears blurring his vision. His father had specifically prohibited his placement with the Dursleys. Had created legal guardianship arrangements that Dumbledore had simply ignored. Had restricted vault access that Dumbledore had somehow circumvented. The betrayal felt even more profound now. Not just a violation of Harry's rights, but a deliberate contravention of his parents' clearly stated wishes. A soft pop announced Pippi's arrival. Master Harry, more visitors have arrived at the gates, the elf reported, eyeing Harry's tear-streaked face with concern. Miss Luna Lovegood and Mr. Neville Longbottom request entrance. Harry quickly wiped his face. They came together. That's unexpected. They is saying they are here to support Master Harry, not to judge or question, Pippi added. The Manor ward sensed no deception. Harry considered for a moment before nodding. Allow them in, please. And Pippi? Have tea brought to the blue drawing room. Unlike his reluctance to see Ron and Hermione, Harry found himself genuinely pleased at the prospect of seeing Luna and Neville. Their letters had offered simple support without conditions or doubts. The blue drawing room was a comfortably elegant space with large windows overlooking the eastern gardens. Harry had barely settled himself when Neville and Luna were escorted in by another house elf. Harry. Neville stepped forward, offering his hand. You look different. Clearer, Luna observed, studying Harry with her head tilted slightly. The Raxperts have definitely departed. Harry smiled, genuinely happy to see them both. Thanks for coming. How did you find the manor? Gran told me how to access it, Neville explained. The Longbottoms and Potters have been allies for centuries. Our family magic recognizes Potter Manor even through its protections. And I simply followed the path the blubbering humdingers indicated, Luna added serenely. They're attracted to places of awakening magic. Tea appeared on the low table between the comfortable chairs. As they settled in, Harry studied his friends. Neville seemed more confident than Harry remembered, his posture straighter, his movements more assured. Luna remained her ethereal self, but her silvery eyes held a sharpness that belied her dreamy demeanor. The Prophet article was mostly accurate, for once, Harry confirmed, answering their unasked question. Dumbledore has been taking money from my vaults for years, and keeping me from my inheritance. Gran says it's outrageous, Neville declared, his voice carrying unusual firmness. The Potter and Black lordships are among the oldest in Britain. Concealing them from you wasn't just wrong, it was an attack on our entire system of governance. The old goat has been gathering too much wool, Luna added cryptically. Now the shears have come out. Harry couldn't help but laugh at Luna's strange metaphor. I suppose that's one way to put it. How are you really, Harry? Neville asked, his expression concerned. This must be overwhelming. Honestly? I'm angry, Harry admitted. Every time I learn something new about what was kept from me, I get angrier. But I'm also relieved, in a way. Things that never made sense before are finally becoming clear. The lifting of compulsion spells often creates clarity, Luna remarked matter-of-factly, stirring her tea. It's like finally removing smudged spectacles you didn't know you were wearing. Harry stared at her. How did you know about the compulsion spells? Luna's smile was enigmatic. Some people see what is. Others see what should be. I tend to see what truly is beneath what appears to be. She means she's always known something was off about your behavior, Neville translated, surprisingly adept at interpreting Luna speak. Luna notices things others miss. It's a gift and a curse, she shrugged. Daddy says I got it from my mother's side. The Follies were known for their perceptiveness before the line nearly died out. The Follies? Harry repeated, remembering something from his recent reading. They were one of the Sacred 28, weren't they? Mother was the last to carry the name, Luna confirmed. I'm a Lovegood by paternity but a Folly by magic. The family gifts tend to manifest, unconventionally in me. Harry nodded, filing away this new information about his friend. What about you, Neville? Your letter mentioned alliance renewal. Neville straightened importantly. Yes. Gran instructed me to formally extend the hand of alliance between Longbottom and Potter, as our ancestors established in 1328 and renewed in every generation since. Except the last, Harry realized. Because I didn't know about it. Exactly, Neville confirmed. Gran was furious when she realized you'd never been informed of the traditional alliances. The Potters, Longbottoms, Bones, and Abbots have formed a voting bloc in the Wisingamot for centuries. Political allies, Harry mused, thinking of Susan Bones and Hannah Abbott. I had no idea. More than political, Neville corrected. The alliance includes mutual aid, shared research, trade preferences, and defense pacts. It's why our families fought together against Grindelwald, and later against you-know-who. And why our parents were all targeted, Luna added quietly. The Death Eaters understood the power of these ancient alliances, even if most modern wizards have forgotten. Harry considered this revelation thoughtfully. So when Dumbledore kept me from claiming my lordship, he wasn't just controlling my money, he was preventing these alliances from reforming. Which kept power centralized around him, Neville concluded. The Order of the Phoenix replaced the traditional alliance structures with Dumbledore at its center, rather than operating through the established family networks. Fascinating how convenient that arrangement was for him, Luna observed mildly, though her eyes flashed. Harry felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. So by filing this lawsuit, I'm not just challenging Dumbledore's financial misconduct, I'm potentially reshaping wizarding politics. Whether you intended to or not, Neville confirmed. Gran says your case has already caused dozens of old family alliances to begin reactivating. People are remembering oaths and obligations that have been dormant for decades. The sleeping dragon stirs, Luna murmured. Old magic awakens. Is that good or bad? Harry asked, feeling the weight of unintended consequences. It depends on what you do with it, Neville said simply. These alliances were originally formed for mutual protection and prosperity. They could serve that purpose again, especially with Voldemort's return. Which brings me to the official reason for our visit, Luna interjected, suddenly businesslike. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. The love goods were never part of the major alliances due to our unconventional approaches. But we have our own traditions of friendship. She handed the pouch to Harry, who opened it carefully to find a silver pendant in the shape of a raven with outstretched wings. It's a Corvus amulet, Luna explained. Mother made it before she died. It warns of betrayal, growing cold when someone who wishes you harm approaches while pretending friendship. Luna. Harry began, touched by the gift. The Longbottoms offer something more traditional, Neville said, producing a sealed parchment bearing the Longbottom crest in wax. This is the formal alliance declaration, already signed by Gran as regent. Once you sign and seal it with the Potter ring, the alliance magic will activate. What exactly does the alliance entail? Harry asked, accepting the document. Mutual defense, political support in the Wizengamot, trade preferences between family businesses, and shared access to certain libraries and research facilities, Neville recited, clearly having been coached by his grandmother. In practice, it means the Longbottoms publicly stand with House Potter in the current dispute and offer whatever resources you require. Harry unrolled the parchment, scanning the formal language of the Alliance Declaration. The document was beautifully illuminated, with the family crests of both houses prominently displayed. At the bottom, Augusta Longbottom's signature stood beside a blank space awaiting his own. I'm honored, Harry said sincerely, looking between his friends. Both by the alliance and by Luna's gift. I don't deserve such loyalty after how little attention I've paid to either of you over the years. Nonsense, Neville dismissed. You've always treated me decently, which is more than most did. And you believed in Luna when others mocked her. And you created the DA, which gave both of us confidence and purpose, Luna added. Friendship isn't measured in minutes of conversation, Harry. It's measured in moments of truth. Harry felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with genuine friendship. Without hesitation, he signed the alliance document, pressing his Potter signet ring into the wax seal beside his signature. The parchment glowed briefly with golden light before duplicating itself, the copy rolling up and vanishing with a soft pop. The copy goes to the Longbottom family vault, Neville explained. The alliance is now officially renewed. We should celebrate. Luna declared. I propose a tour of Potter Manor. I've always wanted to see the famous Potter library. Daddy says it contains texts on experimental charms that exist nowhere else. Harry laughed, finding Luna's enthusiasm infectious. A tour it is. Though I should warn you, I've only been here 3 days myself. I'm still discovering rooms I didn't know existed. The afternoon passed pleasantly as Harry showed his friends through Potter Manor, discovering its wonders alongside them. The library particularly impressed Neville with its extensive collection on herbology, while Luna was delighted by the observatory tower with its ancient telescopes and celestial charts. Your family has been documenting star patterns for centuries, she observed, examining a chart from the 1700s. This could be tremendously valuable for my research on the influence of stellar alignments on magical creatures. You're welcome to use it whenever you like, Harry offered. Both of you can visit the manor anytime. In fact, an idea began forming in his mind. What would you think about staying here for the rest of the summer? There's certainly plenty of room. Neville looked startled but pleased. Really? Gran would probably agree, she's been saying I need more exposure to allied families' traditions. Daddy would miss me, Luna mused, but he's planning an expedition to Sweden soon anyway. I was going to stay with the Weasleys, but that seems potentially awkward now. More than potentially, Harry agreed grimly. I still don't know exactly what they knew about the money Dumbledore was giving them from my vaults. Having allies close would be strategically wise, Neville pointed out. Especially with the preliminary hearing approaching. And the Manor would benefit from more magical presences, Luna added. Houses like these thrive on magical activity after long periods of dormancy. Then it's settled, Harry decided. Send owls to your grandmother and father. Tell them you'll be staying at Potter Manor as my honored guests and allies. As they made their way back downstairs, Harry felt a sense of purpose he'd lacked before. With Neville and Luna's unexpected support, the Manor felt less like a museum of his lost heritage and more like the beginning of something new. The entrance hall fireplace flared green just as they reached the bottom of the grand staircase. Harry tensed, his hand moving to his wand, but relaxed when Andrios Katsaros stepped through, looking unusually grim. Lord Potterblack, he greeted formally, acknowledging Neville and Luna with slight bows. I apologize for the unscheduled visit, but there's been a development you should be aware of immediately. What's happened? Harry asked, leading the solicitor to the nearest sitting room. Katsaros withdrew a scroll from his robes. Dumbledore has filed a counter-petition with the Wizengamot, challenging your emancipation and claiming your declaration of lordship was procedurally invalid due to your age. What? Harry stared at the document Katsaros handed him. Can he do that? He's attempting to, Katsaros confirmed. His petition argues that as your magical guardian, he should have been consulted before Gringotts allowed you to claim your family rings. He's requesting an immediate stay on your emancipation pending full review. That's outrageous. Neville exclaimed. The family rings accepted him. Magic itself has recognized Harry as Lord Potterblack. Dumbledore has no standing to challenge that. Under normal circumstances, you would be correct, Heir Longbottom, Katsaros acknowledged. However, as Chief Warlock, Dumbledore has procedural privileges that allow him to request extraordinary reviews in matters concerning minors. Luna's expression had gone unusually focused. He's trying to regain control. If Harry's emancipation is reversed, he can't pursue the lawsuit independently. Precisely, Katsaros nodded approvingly at her analysis. It's a defensive maneuver designed to undermine the very foundation of our case. Harry felt cold anger settling in his chest. He's not even denying the theft anymore. He's just trying to silence me through legal technicalities. It demonstrates a certain desperation, Katsaros observed. This approach essentially admits the withdrawals occurred but attempts to regain authority over you to prevent legal consequences. What do we do? Harry asked, forcing himself to think strategically rather than emotionally. We've already filed our opposition, Katsaros assured him. More importantly, I've requested an emergency hearing before a neutral faction of the Wizengamot, those members with no known ties to either you or Dumbledore. That hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. So soon? Harry blinked in surprise. The Wizengamot recognizes the urgency, given your scheduled preliminary hearing next week, Katsaros explained. Lady Bones was particularly insistent that this matter be resolved swiftly to prevent procedural delays to the main case. Amelia Bones? Neville interjected. That's significant. The Bones family was traditionally allied with the Potters. She must be honoring the old connections. Indeed, Katsaros agreed. And perhaps seeing an opportunity to check Dumbledore's influence, which has frequently conflicted with her department's authority. Harry considered this information carefully. What do you need from me for tomorrow's hearing? Your presence, dressed in formal Potter robes, Katsaros replied. And preparation for some difficult questioning. Dumbledore's team will attempt to portray you as an impulsive, emotional teenager being manipulated by Gringotts and opportunistic solicitors. We'll help you prepare, Neville offered immediately. Gran has been coaching me on Withdrawals procedures since I was 7. I know exactly how these emergency hearings work. And I can help with emotional centering techniques, Luna added. Clear thoughts lead to clear magic, and the Withdrawals will be assessing both your logical arguments and your magical presence. Harry felt a surge of gratitude for his friend's immediate support. Thank you. Both of you. I'll return in the morning to escort you to the ministry, Katsuros said, rising to leave. In the meantime, I suggest reviewing the Potter family's historical position in the Withdrawals. Your grandfather's portrait may be particularly helpful in that regard. After Katsuros departed, Harry turned to Neville and Luna. I should probably read every book on wizarding law ever written before tomorrow, shouldn't I? Actually, Neville said thoughtfully, I think it's more important you understand who you are than what the law says. Katsuros knows the law. You need to embody House Potter. Neville's right, Luna agreed. The Withdrawals responds to presence as much as precedent. You need to connect with your family magic more deeply. How do I do that? Harry asked, genuinely curious. Neville and Luna exchanged glances. The Potter family ritual room would be the traditional place, Neville suggested. Most ancient houses have one for heir confirmation ceremonies and family magic attunements. Harry remembered passing a sealed door during their tour that Pippi had identified as the ritual chamber. I think I know where it is. But I don't know any Potter family rituals. The room will, Luna said simply. Family magic remembers even when people forget. The Potter ritual chamber was located in the eastern wing of the manor, behind heavy oak doors inscribed with runes that glowed faintly at Harry's approach. Inside, the circular room was lit by enchanted sconces that ignited automatically upon their entrance. The floor featured an intricate pattern of inlaid stone, a series of concentric circles intersected by angular lines that formed the Potter crest at the center. The walls were covered with more runes, these seeming to shift and change when Harry wasn't looking directly at them. This is old magic, Luna whispered reverently. Pre-Hogwarts, maybe even pre-ministry. What am I supposed to do? Harry asked, feeling the magic of the room humming around him like a living presence. Stand in the center, Neville instructed, his voice unusually sure. The heir's position is always at the heart of family magic. Harry stepped carefully onto the Potter crest inlaid in the floor's center. Immediately, the runes around the room brightened, and he felt a surge of magic rising through his feet. Now what? He asked, his voice echoing strangely in the chamber. State your name and claim, Luna suggested. The room is waiting for you to declare yourself. Harry took a deep breath. I am Harry James Potter, son of James and Lily, Lord of the ancient and noble House of Potter. The room's magic intensified, swirling around him like wind, though nothing physically moved. The runes on the walls began to glow more brightly, and the inlaid pattern beneath his feet illuminated one section at a time, forming a complex network of light. I think it's working, Neville said, his voice hushed. The family magic is responding to you. Harry closed his eyes, letting the magic flow through him. It felt familiar yet ancient, like a song he'd heard in infancy but couldn't quite remember. Instinctively, he raised his hands, palms up in a gesture of acceptance. I claim my birthright, he continued, the words coming to him as if whispered by the room itself. I honor those who came before. I protect those who will come after. The Potter line endures through me. A warm, golden light enveloped him completely. Within it, Harry had the strangest sensation of presence, as if generations of Potters stood with him, their magic merging with his own. For a brief, transcendent moment, he wasn't alone, he was part of an unbroken chain stretching back centuries and forward into a future he couldn't yet see. When the light finally faded, Harry opened his eyes to find Neville and Luna watching him with expressions of awe. Your magical aura has changed, Luna observed, her silver eyes wide. It's harmonized somehow. More stable, more defined. How do you feel? Neville asked. Harry considered the question carefully. Complete, he finally answered. Like pieces of me I didn't know were missing have been restored. He looked down at his hands, which seemed to radiate a subtle golden glow that faded even as he watched. The Potter family magic has fully accepted me. More than accepted, Luna corrected. It's embraced you. This will make a significant difference tomorrow when you face the Wizengamot. They'll sense the family magic's endorsement, even if most won't consciously understand what they're perceiving. Harry stepped off the central crest, feeling oddly energized despite the intensity of the experience. Thank you both for suggesting this. I think I understand now what it truly means to be Lord Potter. They left the ritual chamber together, the doors sealing behind them with a soft pulse of magic. As they walked, Harry found himself standing taller, moving with a confidence that felt both new and natural. We should review the likely questions for tomorrow's hearing, Neville suggested as they made their way to the library. Dumbledore will have coached his supporters carefully. The traditional challenges to emancipation focus on 3 areas, Luna added, surprising both boys with her knowledge of legal procedure. Magical maturity, financial responsibility, and psychological readiness. How do you know all this? Harry asked. Luna's smile was tinged with sadness. After Mother died, some of Father's relatives tried to claim I should be removed from his care. They said grief had made him unfit as a parent. There was a Wizengamot hearing about my guardianship when I was 9. I had no idea, Harry said softly. I'm sorry, Luna. It worked out well enough, she shrugged. Daddy won, obviously. But I learned a great deal about how the old families view guardianship and inheritance. They take magical bloodlines very seriously, even when they pretend progressive views in public. In the library, Neville took charge of their preparation with surprising authority, conjuring a mock Wizengamot bench and drilling Harry on potential questions. Luna focused on helping Harry maintain emotional equilibrium, teaching him subtle centering techniques that wouldn't be obvious to observers but would help him remain calm under pressure. By midnight, exhaustion had set in, but Harry felt better prepared than he had for any challenge since the Triwizard Tournament. His friends retired to guest rooms in the western wing, promising to be ready early for the hearing. Alone in the Lord's chambers, a suite he'd initially hesitated to occupy but which Pippi had insisted was his right, Harry found himself drawn to the window overlooking the manor grounds. Moonlight silvered the gardens and forests beyond, the Potter estate stretching into the distance like a kingdom from a forgotten age. His kingdom, by right of birth and magic. The thought still felt surreal. 2 weeks ago, he'd been just Harry, the unwanted boy from Privet Drive who'd found conditional acceptance in the wizarding world. Now he stood as Lord Potter Black, with ancestral lands, political responsibilities, and a growing circle of allies. And tomorrow, he would face Albus Dumbledore before the Wizengamot, not as a student or a weapon or a pawn, but as an equal under magical law. The prospect was terrifying. And exhilarating. I'm ready, he told his reflection in the window glass. I'm not alone anymore. The family magic hummed in agreement, a warm presence at the edge of his awareness. No, not alone. Never again. The Ministry of Magic's Wizengamot chamber had always intimidated Harry. His previous appearances, first for his underage magic hearing, then during the aftermath of the Department of Mysteries, had left him with impressions of towering seats, hostile faces, and arcane procedures designed to confuse and overwhelm. Today, entering alongside Andrios Katsaros with Neville and Luna following as his official witnesses, Harry viewed the chamber with new eyes. The impressive architecture and formal protocols weren't meant to intimidate, he now understood, but to solemnize. This was the heart of wizarding governance, imperfect, certainly, but foundational to their society. Harry wore traditional Potter family robes in deep burgundy with subtle gold embroidery at the collar and cuffs. The Potter crest was displayed on his left breast, with the black crest on his right, both rendered in threads that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. His signet rings gleamed on his right hand, visible evidence of his claim to both houses. Remember, Katsuros murmured as they approached the central position before the Wiesengemot seats, this is an extraordinary review hearing, not a trial. Lady Marchbanks is presiding, which works in our favor. She respects tradition but has little patience for procedural games. Harry nodded, his eyes already scanning the tiered seats for familiar faces. The full Wiesengemot consisted of 50 seats, but only the 15 members of the extraordinary review panel would participate today. He recognized Griselda Marchbanks, a formidable elderly which he'd met during his OWL examinations, Amelia Bones, whose monocle glinted in the chamber's light, Tiberius Ogden, looking uncomfortable as he tried to maintain neutrality despite his connection to Dumbledore, and several others he knew only by reputation. Dumbledore himself sat not on the Wiesengemot bench but at a table to the side, flanked by Elphia's Doge and another elderly wizard Harry didn't recognize. The headmaster wore formal plum-colored Wiesengemot robes despite not presiding today, a subtle reminder of his official position. Their eyes met briefly across the chamber. Dumbledore inclined his head in a gesture that might have appeared grandfatherly to observers but which Harry now recognized as condescension. Harry responded with a formal nod, neither friendly nor hostile, but the measured acknowledgement of one official to another. The extraordinary review panel is now in session, announced a court scribe as Marchbanks tapped her wand against a small gong. Presiding, Lady Griselda Marchbanks, Order of Merlin, First Class, Governor of the Wizarding Examinations Authority, Elder of the Wiesengemot. Marchbanks peered down at the assembled participants, her ancient face composed in an expression of stern neutrality. We are convened to address the petition filed by Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore challenging the Emancipation and Lordship Declaration of Harry James Potterblack. As this matter concerns both an ancient inheritance and the welfare of a legal minor, the panel will proceed with due diligence. She turned her gaze to Dumbledore's table. Professor Dumbledore, as the petitioner, you may present your challenge first. Dumbledore rose gracefully, his long beard gleaming silver in the chamber's light. Thank you, Lady Marchbanks, honored members of the panel. I bring this petition not out of personal interest, but out of deep concern for a student under my care. His voice carried the same measured, grandfatherly tone Harry had heard countless times in the headmaster's office, reasonable, concerned, wise. Once, it had made Harry feel safe and valued. Now, recognizing the careful performance behind it, he found it grating. For 15 years, I have served as young Harry's magical guardian, Dumbledore continued. In that capacity, I have made decisions regarding his education, his safety, and yes, his financial welfare, always with his best interests as my guiding principle. He spread his hands in a gesture of appeal. The emergency emancipation granted by Gringotts circumvented proper ministry procedures, which require guardian consent or demonstrated necessity for minors under 17. No court evaluation of Harry's readiness for emancipation was conducted. No transition plan for his assumption of adult responsibilities was established. Most concerningly, no consideration was given to his ongoing magical education, which remains incomplete. These concerns may seem procedural, but they speak to a deeper issue. Harry Potter, while extraordinary in many ways, is still a 16-year-old wizard with the impulsivity and emotional vulnerabilities natural to his age. To thrust upon him the full responsibilities of two ancient houses, with all their political, financial, and social obligations, is to risk not only his welfare but the stability of houses Potter and Black. Dumbledore turned slightly, his gaze finding Harry. I do not dispute that Harry will someday make a fine lord of his houses. Indeed, I have always had the highest hopes for his future. But that future requires proper preparation, guidance from those with his best interests at heart, not rushed emancipation driven by financial disputes that could be resolved through proper guardianship mediation. He returned his attention to the panel. I therefore request that this body temporarily suspend Harry's emancipation and lordship claims pending a full review of his readiness according to standard ministry procedures. During this review period, I propose that his financial concerns be addressed through the appointment of a neutral third party to oversee the Potter and Black estates, with any disputed withdrawals placed in escrow until a final determination can be made. Doge and the other wizard nodded approvingly as Dumbledore resumed his seat, his expression one of perfect concern for a misguided youth. Several panel members were nodding thoughtfully as well, apparently finding his reasoning sound. "Thank you, Professor Dumbledore," Marchbanks acknowledged before turning to Harry's side. "Mr. Katzeros, you may present Lord Potterblack's response." Katzeros rose with measured confidence. "Thank you, Lady Marchbanks. Honored members of the panel, I stand before you representing Lord Harry James Potterblack in opposition to this extraordinary petition. I say, extraordinary, not merely because of the procedural classification, but because of the truly remarkable circumstances that have brought us here." His voice, carrying just a hint of his Mediterranean accent, filled the chamber without appearing to rise in volume, a skilled orator's technique that immediately commanded attention. Professor Dumbledore claims to have acted as Lord Potterblack's magical guardian for 15 years. Yet we have discovered, through diligent search of ministry records, no formal guardianship registration, no court appointment, and no documentation of the regular welfare reviews required for magical orphans. In short, we have found no legal evidence that Albus Dumbledore was ever properly appointed as Harry Potter's magical guardian. Murmurs swept through the chamber as panel members exchanged surprised glances. Dumbledore's expression remained placid, though Harry noticed a slight tension in his posture. "What we have found," Katzeros continued, "is the last will and testament of James and Lily Potter, which specifically named Sirius Black as their son's guardian, with Remus Lupin, Frank and Alice Longbottom, or Minerva McGonagall as alternatives, in that order." He produced a sealed document. This will was properly filed with the Department of Magical Inheritances in October 1981. Yet it was never executed. Moreover, he pressed on before the whispers could grow louder, we have found evidence that Professor Dumbledore, acting under this unsubstantiated guardianship claim, made 89 separate withdrawals from the Potter family vaults over 15 years, totaling 3.7 million galleons. These withdrawals continued even after Lord Potterblack began attending Hogwarts, without his knowledge or consent. Katzeros paused, allowing the implications to sink in. "I submit to the panel that this is not a case of a concerned guardian protecting a minor from hasty decisions. This is a case of a powerful figure attempting to maintain control over significant financial and political assets now that his unauthorized access has been discovered and challenged." He gestured to Harry, who sat straight-backed and composed beside him. "As for Lord Potterblack's readiness to assume his titles, I remind the panel that family magic itself has rendered judgment. Both the Potter and Black family rings accepted him without reservation, a magical determination that has traditionally superseded administrative concerns about age or preparation." Katzeros produced another document. "Furthermore, a complete medical examination performed at Gringotts by certified healer Yasmin Shafiq revealed that Lord Potterblack's magical core is fully mature, a condition usually achieved around age 17 but occasionally earlier in wizards of exceptional power. Healer Shafiq's assessment concludes that, magically speaking, Lord Potterblack has reached adulthood." This revelation caused another stir among the panel members. Magical maturity was a recognized criterion for early emancipation under wizarding law, independent of chronological age. "I therefore respectfully submit that this petition should be dismissed," Katzeros concluded. "The family magic has spoken. Lord Potterblack's magical maturity has been medically verified. And perhaps most importantly, the person claiming guardianship authority has demonstrated through his actions that his primary concern is not Lord Potterblack's welfare, but control of his assets." As Katzeros resumed his seat, Lady Marchbanks adjusted her spectacles and surveyed the chamber. "The panel will now question both parties directly. Lord Potterblack, please step forward." Harry rose, feeling the weight of all eyes upon him. The centering techniques Luna had taught him helped him remain outwardly calm despite the flutter of nerves in his stomach. He approached the indicated position in the center of the chamber, standing with his back straight and his hands clasped loosely before him, the formal posture Neville had demonstrated for addressing the Wizengamot. "Lord Potterblack," Marchbanks began, her voice crisp but not unkind, "when did you first learn of your inheritance and lordship eligibility?" "4 days ago, Lady Marchbanks," Harry answered clearly. Director Ragnok of Gringotts informed me during a meeting about unauthorized withdrawals from my family vaults. And in those 4 days, what steps have you taken to prepare yourself for the responsibilities of your position? I've reviewed the Potter family journals dating back 3 generations, Harry replied. I've studied the current political alignments within the Withdrawals, consulted with the Potter family portraits regarding our historical positions on major issues, and begun renewing traditional alliances with allied houses, starting with the Longbottoms. His answer seemed to impress several panel members, including Amelia Bones, who nodded slightly. Why did you choose to claim your lordships immediately rather than waiting until your 17th birthday? Asked Tiberius Ogden, his expression skeptical. Harry met his gaze steadily. Once I discovered the extent of the unauthorized withdrawals, I needed legal standing to address them. More importantly, I felt it was time to honor my parents' legacy by taking up the responsibilities they would have prepared me for had they lived. And what of your education? Inquired a witch Harry didn't recognize. How do you intend to balance your lordship duties with completing your Hogwarts studies? Many heirs in similar positions have managed both, madam, Harry pointed out respectfully. I intend to return to Hogwarts for my 6th and 7th years, while handling estate matters during holidays and through correspondence, as is traditional. Several of my ancestors did the same after assuming their lordships early. The questioning continued for nearly 20 minutes, with panel members probing Harry's understanding of his estates, his plans for political participation, and his readiness for adult responsibilities. Throughout, Harry maintained a composed demeanor, answering directly and honestly while demonstrating more knowledge than many had expected. Finally, Marchbanks turned to Dumbledore. Professor, please step forward for questioning. Dumbledore approached with his customary serene expression, standing a few feet from Harry. Professor Dumbledore, Marchbanks began, Mr. Katsaros has alleged that no formal guardianship documentation exists. How do you respond? In the chaotic aftermath of the Potter murders and Voldemort's fall, Dumbledore explained, ignoring the flinches at the name, many emergency measures were implemented. As chief warlock and the wizard responsible for Harry's placement, I was granted emergency magical guardianship by Minister Bagnold herself. The documentation, I believe, resides in the sealed files from that period. Yet no regular welfare reviews were conducted, Amelia Bones noted sharply. Standard procedure for magical orphans requires annual assessments, regardless of emergency provisions. Harry's unique status required unique protections, Dumbledore replied smoothly. Regular ministry assessments would have compromised the security measures protecting him from Death Eaters seeking revenge. Surely the panel understands the exceptional circumstances. What about the withdrawals from the Potter vaults? Asked another panel member. How do you justify accessing family vaults beyond the established trust fund? The Potter estate required active management, Dumbledore explained, his tone reasonable. Investments needed attention, properties maintenance, security arrangements funding. Additionally, Harry's unique position demanded extraordinary protective measures, all of which required financial support. I kept meticulous records of all expenditures, which I'm happy to submit for review. And why was Lord Potterblack never informed of his inheritance? Marchbanks pressed. Even accounting for security concerns, surely he deserved to know of his family legacy. For the first time, Dumbledore appeared slightly uncomfortable. I believed, perhaps mistakenly, that introducing Harry to the complexities of his inheritance too early might overwhelm him, particularly given the burdens he already carried. My intention was to begin preparing him this coming year, as he approached his 17th birthday. Harry couldn't contain a short, incredulous laugh, quickly stifled but noted by several panel members. You have something to add, Lord Potterblack? Marchbanks inquired, her expression unreadable. Harry hesitated, glancing at Katsaros, who gave a subtle nod. With respect, Lady Marchbanks, I find that explanation difficult to reconcile with reality. Professor Dumbledore allowed me to face a possessed teacher, a basilisk, Dementors, the Triwizard Tournament, and Voldemort himself, yet considered knowledge of my family history too overwhelming. Dumbledore turned to Harry, his blue eyes lacking their usual twinkle. Harry, my boy, Lord Potterblack, Harry corrected quietly but firmly. In this chamber, addressing matters of my inheritance, I am not your student or your boy, Professor Dumbledore. I am Lord Potterblack. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Many panel members appeared startled by Harry's assertion, while others nodded approvingly at his handling of the subtle diminishment. Yes, of course, Dumbledore conceded, though his expression suggested displeasure at the correction. Lord Potterblack, then. I have only ever acted with your best interests at heart, guided by considerations you could not fully appreciate at the time. Including paying my relatives for my care when they provided little beyond reluctant shelter? Harry asked, maintaining his composure. Including funding the Weasley family from my vaults without their knowledge, or mine? Including transferring substantial sums to your personal accounts? Murmurs swept through the chamber at these specific allegations. Dumbledore's expression remained calm, though his eyes had lost their characteristic warmth. Financial matters can appear irregular when viewed without context, he replied carefully. Each transfer served a legitimate purpose in the complex network of protections and support systems established for your benefit. Yet you never once mentioned them to me, Harry pointed out. Not even when I came of Hogwarts age and began making my own withdrawals from my trust vault. Why was I kept ignorant of my own financial affairs if everything was above board? Before Dumbledore could respond, Lady Marchbanks tapped her gong. We are straying into matters better addressed in the main lawsuit rather than this procedural hearing. Let us return to the question at hand, Lord Potterblack's emancipation and lordship claims. The questioning continued for another half hour, with panel members probing both Harry's readiness and Dumbledore's justifications. Throughout, Harry maintained the dignity and composure Neville and Luna had helped him practice, while Dumbledore gradually shifted from benevolent concern to more defensive positioning as the panel's questions grew increasingly skeptical. Finally, Marchbanks called an end to the questioning. The panel will now deliberate. All parties will please wait outside the chamber. As they filed out, Harry caught Dumbledore watching him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret, something between surprise and calculation, with perhaps a hint of genuine regret. Harry met his gaze steadily before turning away to join Katsuros, Neville, and Luna in the waiting area. You were brilliant, Neville whispered once they were settled on a bench outside the chamber. Gran would be impressed, and she's never impressed. You maintained perfect emotional equilibrium, Luna agreed. Even when he tried to call you, my boy, that was a deliberate attempt to trigger your submission to his authority, you know. I felt it, Harry admitted. Like a compulsion, almost, pushing me to defer to him. But it was much weaker than before. The family magic is protecting you, Neville explained. Old houses developed defenses against magical manipulation over centuries. It's one reason the lordships were traditionally claimed early. The family magic shields the heir more completely once the title is formally acknowledged. How do you think it's going? Harry asked Katsuros, who had been standing silently nearby, apparently deep in thought. The solicitor's expression was cautiously optimistic. The panel seemed receptive to our evidence of magical maturity, and visibly disturbed by the lack of formal guardianship documentation. Dumbledore's explanations, while smooth, contained several contradictions that did not go unnoticed. Bones was clearly on our side, Neville observed. And Marchbanks values tradition, the family ring's acceptance would carry significant weight with her. Ogden and Folly seemed to favor Dumbledore, Luna added. The others appeared undecided. We need only a simple majority, Katsuros reminded them. 8 votes will sustain your emancipation. They fell silent as Dumbledore emerged from a private consultation with his legal team, his expression serene despite the tension evident in his posture. He glanced toward Harry's group but made no move to approach, instead settling on a bench at the opposite end of the waiting area. After what felt like hours but was likely only 40 minutes, the chamber doors reopened, and the court scribe summoned them to return. Harry took a deep breath, again employing Luna's centering techniques as he followed Katsuros back to their position before the panel. Lady Marchbanks surveyed the chamber, her ancient face impassive. The Extraordinary Review Panel has reached its determination regarding the petition to suspend Lord Potterblack's emancipation and lordship claims. She unrolled a small scroll. By a vote of 11 to 4, the panel finds that the magical acceptance of Lord Potterblack by both the Potter and Black family magics constitutes a binding recognition that supersedes administrative concerns regarding chronological age. Harry felt a wave of relief wash over him, though he maintained his formal posture. Furthermore, Marchbanks continued, the panel finds that the medical verification of Lord Potterblack's magical maturity satisfies the criterion for early emancipation under Clause 7 of the Wizarding Minority Statutes. The panel also notes with concern the absence of proper guardianship documentation, which casts doubt on the petitioner standing to challenge the emancipation in the first place. She rolled the scroll closed. The petition is therefore denied. Lord Potterblack's emancipation and lordship claims are upheld as valid and binding. This matter is closed. The tap of her gong signaled the end of the hearing. Harry exhaled slowly, accepting Katsurosa's subtle nod of congratulation and the beaming smiles from Neville and Luna behind him. Across the chamber, Dumbledore's expression remained composed, but Harry thought he detected a flash of genuine concern in the old wizard's eyes, not for Harry, but for himself. For the first time, perhaps, Dumbledore was realizing that his carefully constructed narratives and justifications might not be enough to shield him from the consequences of his actions. As the chamber began to clear, Amelia Bones approached, her monocle gleaming in the magical light. Lord Potterblack, she greeted him formally. The House of Bones would welcome the opportunity to discuss renewal of our traditional alliance at your convenience. I would be honored, Lady Bones, Harry replied, recalling Neville's coaching on proper responses to such overtures. Perhaps next week, after the preliminary hearing. That would be suitable, she agreed before lowering her voice slightly. You have conducted yourself with dignity today, Lord Potterblack. Your parents would be proud. The simple statement, delivered without fanfare, affected Harry more deeply than he expected. Thank you, Lady Bones. That means a great deal. As she departed, Harry noticed other Wizengamot members watching him with new interest, some with approval, others with calculation. The political landscape was shifting, just as Neville had predicted. And so it begins, Katsuros murmured, echoing Harry's thoughts. The preliminary hearing next week will be considerably more complex now that your standing has been formally upheld. Dumbledore will change tactics, Luna observed, joining them as the chamber emptied. Today was about trying to silence you through procedural means. When that failed, he'll move to damage control and narrative management. What does that mean? Harry asked. It means, Neville explained grimly, that he'll try to destroy your reputation before you can destroy his. As if confirming Neville's prediction, the Daily Prophet's evening edition arrived at Potter Manor just before dinner, bearing the headline, Wizengamot upholds Potter's lordship claims sources question boy who lived stability after traumatic year. The article beneath featured anonymous quotes from those close to the situation, suggesting Harry's lawsuit was driven by emotional instability following Sirius Black's death and the stress of unfounded accusations he'd faced the previous year. And so the counterattack begins, Fleamont's portrait observed as Harry read the article aloud in the dining room. Predictable, but effective if left unchallenged. We won't leave it unchallenged, Harry assured his grandfather. Luna's father has offered me space in the Quibbler for my side of the story. An excellent start, Fleamont approved. But remember, this battle will be fought on multiple fronts simultaneously, legal, political, and public opinion. We're already preparing for all three, Neville assured him, gesturing to the piles of documents, historical records, and news clippings they'd assembled. The Longbottom and Lovegood networks are spreading the word about Potter-Black Alliance renewals. And Gringotts has officially frozen all remaining Potter and Black assets pending resolution of the lawsuit, Luna added, consulting a letter that had arrived earlier. Dumbledore can no longer access any of your funds, even indirectly. Harry nodded, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and apprehension. The pieces were moving, the battle lines drawn. In just 5 days, He'd gone from ignorant pawn to active player in a game with stakes higher than mere Galleons, a game that would determine not just his financial future, but the political landscape of wizarding Britain and the legacy of Albus Dumbledore. The preliminary hearing is in 4 days, he said, looking around at his unexpected allies. Dumbledore has had decades to build his reputation and power. We have less than a week to prepare our challenge. Then we'd better get started, Neville said simply, reaching for another stack of historical Wizarding records. Luna nodded, her dreamy expression giving way to focused determination. The greatest advantage of youth is that no one expects us to win, until we do. Harry smiled, genuinely grateful for their unwavering support. Whatever came next, he was no longer facing it alone. The boy who lived had found his voice, claimed his legacy, and assembled allies who believed in him. And in 4 days, the wizarding world would witness the first true confrontation between Harry Potter and Albus Dumbledore, not as mentor and student, but as equals before the law. The game, indeed, was afoot. Chapter 3, Judgment Day. The morning of the trial arrived with a sense of inevitability. Harry stood at his bedroom window watching dawn break over Potter Manor's grounds, the golden light gradually illuminating gardens his ancestors had walked for centuries. For days of intense preparation had passed in a blur of legal briefings, political strategy sessions, and unexpected revelations from the Potter family archives. Sleep had proven elusive the night before. Harry had spent hours reviewing the evidence, rehearsing responses to likely questions, and contemplating the magnitude of what he was about to do. Challenging Albus Dumbledore before the entire Wizarding wasn't just about recovering stolen gold, it was about exposing decades of manipulation to the wizarding world. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, turning from the window. Neville entered, already dressed in formal robes bearing the Longbottom crest. Over the past week, he'd become Harry's most steadfast supporter, offering insights into wizarding traditions and political dynamics that had been deliberately kept from Harry for years. "Gran just arrived," Neville announced. "She's brought something she thinks you should see before we leave for the ministry." "I'll be right down," Harry promised, turning back to the mirror to straighten his formal Potter robes. The deep burgundy fabric seemed to shimmer slightly in the morning light, the gold embroidery catching the sun. With both the Potter and black signet rings gleaming on his fingers, he barely recognized himself, the transformation from neglected boy to lordly heir now visibly complete. In the Manor's main study, Augusta Longbottom stood examining a portrait of Fleamont Potter with critical interest. Despite her advanced age, she carried herself with imperial dignity, her infamous vulture-topped hat perched precariously but firmly atop her severe grey bun. "Lord Potterblack," she greeted as Harry entered, giving him a formal nod that nonetheless conveyed genuine respect. "You look appropriately formidable." "Thank you for coming, Lady Longbottom," Harry replied, having learned the proper forms of address during Neville's crash course in pure-blood etiquette. "Neville mentioned you had something to show me." "Indeed." She withdrew a sealed envelope from her handbag. "This arrived at Longbottom Hall this morning by special courier. The sender requested I deliver it personally." Harry accepted the envelope cautiously. The wax seal bore no identifying crest, just an elegant M impressed into deep green wax. "It's been checked for hexes and compulsions," Augusta assured him, noting his hesitation. "Both by our house elves and myself personally. It appears to be exactly what it seems, correspondence from House Malfoy." "Malfoy?" Harry repeated incredulously. "Lucius Malfoy is writing to me?" "After the Department of Mysteries?" "Not Lucius," Augusta corrected. "Narcissa. It seems the Lady Malfoy has taken an unusual interest in your case against Dumbledore." Even more bewildered, Harry broke the seal and unfolded the parchment inside. The handwriting was elegant and precise. "Lord Potterblack, as the trial approaches, I find myself compelled to communicate certain information that may prove relevant to your case against Albus Dumbledore. While our families have stood opposed in recent conflicts, I write to you today in my capacity as a daughter of House Black, a house you now lead by right of magic and inheritance. Sirius Black, whatever his faults and however estranged from the family, was my cousin. His unjust imprisonment without trial was the first in a pattern of legal irregularities surrounding your guardianship. I have reason to believe Dumbledore actively prevented Sirius from receiving a trial specifically to maintain control over you and the Potter estate. Enclosed you will find copies of ministry documents that were in my late husband's possession, communications between Bartemius Crouch, Millicent Bagnold, and Albus Dumbledore regarding the disposition of both Sirius Black and yourself in November 1981. Note particularly the third document, in which Dumbledore explicitly argues against a trial for Sirius on grounds of public safety and the child's best interests. I provide this information not as a gesture of alliance, but of justice. House Black has fallen far from its former glory, divided by conflicts that have weakened our bloodline and legacy. As the new Lord Black, you are entitled to know the full history of how your inheritance was manipulated. Should you prevail in your suit against Dumbledore, I would request a formal meeting to discuss the future relationship between yourself and the remaining members of House Black, including my son, Draco, who remains a potential heir should you not produce children of your own. Respectfully, Narcissa Malfoy née Black. Harry stared at the letter in disbelief before examining the enclosed documents. True to Narcissa's word, they contained damning evidence of Dumbledore's deliberate efforts to prevent Sirius from receiving a trial, actions that directly contradicted the image of justice and fairness the headmaster had always projected. This is... Harry began, unable to fully articulate his feelings. Quite significant, Augusta finished for him, her expression grim. Narcissa Malfoy would not involve herself unless she perceived a substantial shift in the political winds. That she provides actual evidence against Dumbledore suggests House Malfoy is hedging its bets. Or that she's genuinely offended by the treatment of her cousin, whatever their differences, Luna suggested, entering the study with a tray of tea floating behind her. She had arrived the previous evening after finalizing arrangements with her father regarding the Quibbler's coverage of the trial. Augusta raised a skeptical eyebrow. The Black family notion of justice has always been selective at best. Still, this confirms what we suspected, Neville pointed out, scanning the documents over Harry's shoulder. Dumbledore deliberately isolated you from anyone who might have challenged his authority over you or the Potter estate. Harry nodded slowly, a cold anger settling in his chest as he considered the implications. Sirius spent 12 years in Azkaban while Dumbledore knew he deserved a trial. All to maintain control over me and my inheritance. This should be added to our evidence immediately, Augusta declared. Andrios Katsaros needs to see this before the trial begins. As if summoned by the mention of his name, the fireplace flared green and Katsaros stepped through, impeccably dressed in formal legal robes. His expression was serious but confident as he greeted everyone with precise formality. We have new evidence, Harry announced without preamble, handing over Narcissa's letter and the enclosed documents. Katsaros reviewed them swiftly, his eyebrows rising slightly, the most extreme reaction Harry had ever seen from the composed solicitor. This substantiates our theory of systematic isolation, he confirmed. These will be presented today during our argument on pattern of control. He glanced at the ornate clock on the mantelpiece. We should depart within the hour. The Wiesengemot convenes at 10, but I expect significant press presence. It would be advantageous to arrive before the media circus fully assembles. Harry nodded, handing his empty teacup to Pippi, who had appeared silently at his elbow. I'm ready. Has there been any response from Ron or Hermione? A shadow crossed Neville's face. Nothing beyond what they sent yesterday. Harry had written to both his friends again after the emancipation hearing, explaining in greater detail what he had discovered and why he was pursuing the lawsuit. Ron's reply had been brief and uncomfortable, mentioning his parents' continued insistence that there must be an explanation and suggesting Harry was being manipulated by people who don't know Dumbledore like we do. Hermione's response had been longer but no less disappointing, filled with cautious phrases about considering all perspectives and not rushing to judgment. They've made their choice, Harry said quietly. At least for now. Luna touched his arm gently. Change is difficult. Some people need time to adjust when pedestals crumble. Harry managed a small smile at her peculiar but apt metaphor. You're right. And I have more support than I ever expected. He glanced around at the group assembled in his ancestral home, people who had stood with him based on truth and justice rather than Dumbledore's carefully crafted narratives. We should review the sequence of today's proceedings one final time, Katsuros suggested, extracting a slim folder from his briefcase. The next 40 minutes were spent in focused discussion of procedural details, likely opposing arguments, and strategic responses. By the time they were ready to depart, Harry felt as prepared as he could possibly be for the confrontation ahead. Remember, Katsuros said as they gathered before the manor's main fireplace, today is not merely about financial restitution. It is about establishing the truth and asserting your autonomy. Dumbledore will attempt to reframe the narrative, to position himself as the wise guardian and you as the impetuous youth. Our task is to consistently redirect attention to documented facts rather than emotional appeals. Harry nodded, squaring his shoulders beneath the weight of his formal robes. Let's do this. One by one, they stepped into the emerald flames, calling out, Ministry of Magic, Courtroom 10, as they vanished into the Fleur network. The scene at the ministry was precisely as Katsuros had predicted. Despite their early arrival, a substantial crowd had already gathered in the atrium, reporters with floating quills and magical cameras, ministry employees lingering with poorly disguised curiosity, and various political figures positioning themselves to be seen supporting one side or the other. Harry emerged from the Fleur with practiced grace, a far cry from his usual stumbling exits, to find flashbulbs immediately popping and questions being shouted from all directions. Katsuros smoothly moved to his side, creating a buffer between Harry and the most aggressive reporters. Lord Potterblack has no comment at this time, the solicitor stated firmly. All relevant statements will be made within the proper legal proceedings. Augusta Longbottom's imposing presence helped clear a path through the crowd, her reputation for hexing impertinent journalists apparently still remembered by the wizarding press. Luna and Neville flanked Harry as they made their way toward the elevators, creating a unified front that attracted significant attention. Harry! Harry, over here! Harry turned at the familiar voice, surprised to see Fred and George Weasley pushing through the crowd. Unlike the rest of the spectators, they wore formal business robes in a deep purple with subtle WWW monogramming, a far cry from their usual flamboyant attire. We came to show support, Fred explained as they reached him. Officially, as your business partners. Unofficially, as your friends, George added, his expression unusually serious. Regardless of family complications. Thank you, Harry said sincerely, touched by their gesture. That means a lot. We've been reviewing our finances properly, Fred continued in a lower voice. You were right about the money. Monthly payments to our parents labeled Potter Security Stipend, going back years, but coded through Gringotts transfers to look like Dad's ministry bonuses, George finished. They wouldn't have known the real source unless they specifically asked. Harry nodded, unsurprised but still disappointed. And your mother? The twins exchanged uncomfortable glances. Mum's, complicated, Fred admitted. Loyal to Dumbledore to a fault. But Dad's asking questions now, George added. Proper ones. That's something. Before Harry could respond, Katsuros gently touched his elbow. We should proceed, Lord Potterblack. The Wizengamot will be seating soon. With a final nod to the twins, Harry continued toward the elevators. As they descended to the courtroom level, he found himself grateful for the small gestures of support, Fred and George's appearance, Narcissa's unexpected letter, even the formal acknowledgments from Wizengamot members they passed in the corridors. Each reinforced that he wasn't standing alone, despite Ron and Hermione's absence. Courtroom 10, the same imposing chamber where Harry had once been tried for underage magic, had been prepared for a full Wizengamot session. Unlike his previous appearance as a defendant seated in a central chair, today Harry would present his case from the plaintiff's podium, positioned with equal prominence to the defendants. As they entered through the side door reserved for participants, Harry immediately spotted Dumbledore already in place at the defendant's table. The headmaster wore formal Wizengamot robes despite appearing today as defendant rather than chief warlock, a subtle reminder of his position within the very body judging him. Beside him sat Elphias Doge and a younger wizard Harry didn't recognize, presumably additional legal counsel. Katsuros guided Harry to their assigned position, arranging their evidence documents with meticulous precision. Augusta, Neville, and Luna took seats in the witness section nearby, ready to provide testimony if called upon. The gallery above filled rapidly as spectators and press representatives sought prime viewing positions for what was already being called the trial of the decade. Harry recognized numerous faces among the crowd, ministry officials, Hogwarts professors including a particularly severe-looking McGonagall, several Weasleys, and even Lucius Malfoy, recently released from Azkaban following substantial donations to the right officials. At precisely 10 o'clock, a side door opened, and the members of the Wizengamot filed in, their plum-colored robes creating a sea of uniform formality around the chamber's upper tiers. With Dumbledore unable to preside, Tiberius Ogden had recused himself due to his connection to the defendant, leaving Deputy Chief Witch Amelia Bones to lead the proceedings. "Seal the doors," Bones commanded once all members were seated. The August Wizengamot of Magical Britain is now in session. A hush fell over the chamber as Bones surveyed the assembly with characteristic stern efficiency. "We convene today to hear the case of Potterblack vs. Dumbledore, a civil suit alleging financial malfeasance, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraudulent representation in matters of guardianship and inheritance." She turned her monocled gaze to Katsuros. "Counsel for the plaintiff may present opening arguments." Katsuros rose with calm dignity, his voice clear and measured as he addressed the assembled Wizengamot. "Honored members, I stand before you representing Lord Harry James Potterblack in a matter that strikes at the very foundation of magical inheritance law and the sacred trust of guardianship." He paused, allowing his words to resonate through the silent chamber before continuing. "The facts of this case are both simple and profoundly disturbing. Following the tragic deaths of James and Lily Potter in October 1981, Albus Dumbledore positioned himself as the magical guardian of their infant son, Harry. In this capacity, he gained access to the substantial Potter family vaults at Gringotts. Katsuros gestured to the evidence folders arrayed before him. Over the subsequent 15 years, Dumbledore made 89 separate withdrawals from these vaults, totaling 3.7 million galleons. These withdrawals continued even after Harry Potter began attending Hogwarts, without his knowledge or consent. Murmurs spread through the gallery as the specific figure was stated publicly for the first time. Perhaps most troublingly, Katsuros continued, Dumbledore systematically concealed from Lord Potterblack his true inheritance and status in wizarding society. The heir to two ancient and noble houses was raised in ignorance of his family legacy, political standing, and financial resources, a circumstance that served to maintain Dumbledore's unchecked control over both the young wizard and his substantial assets. He turned slightly, gesturing toward Harry. "We will demonstrate through documented evidence that these actions constituted not well-intentioned protection, as the defense will undoubtedly claim, but a deliberate pattern of isolation, manipulation, and financial exploitation that cannot be justified under any reasonable interpretation of guardianship law." Katsuros paced slowly before the Wizengamot benches. "This case is not merely about recovering misappropriated funds, although we do seek full restitution plus punitive damages totaling 5 million galleons. More fundamentally, it is about establishing that no wizard, regardless of his titles, positions, or claimed good intentions, stands above the law or beyond the sacred obligations of magical guardianship." He returned to his position beside Harry. "We ask this body to render judgment based not on the defendant's reputation or historical contributions, but on the documented facts of his actions toward a magical orphan placed in his care." "Thank you." As Katsuros seated himself, Amelia Bones nodded and turned to the defense table. "Counsel for the defendant may present opening arguments." Elphias Doge rose slowly, his aged frame belying the sharp legal mind that had served the Wizengamot for decades. "Honored members," he began, his voice quavering slightly, "I stand before you today representing Albus Dumbledore, a wizard whose lifetime of service to magical Britain requires no enumeration in this chamber. He adjusted his spectacles, peering up at the assembled Withdrawals members. The plaintiff's counsel has presented a narrative of exploitation and deception. I will present a different narrative, one of extraordinary circumstances requiring extraordinary measures, undertaken by a wizard faced with unprecedented challenges in the protection of both a uniquely threatened child and the wizarding world itself. Doge gestured toward Dumbledore, who sat with perfect composure, his expression one of mild sadness rather than concern. Following the fall of He Who Must Not Be Named and the deaths of James and Lily Potter, Albus Dumbledore faced a situation without precedent in our history. The infant Harry Potter, inexplicably the vanquisher of the darkest wizard of our time, became an immediate target for surviving Death Eaters and other malevolent forces. In consultation with then-Minister Bagnold and the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Dumbledore implemented comprehensive security measures to ensure the child's safety, measures that necessarily included financial arrangements for his protection, maintenance, and eventual education. Doge's voice strengthened as he continued. All withdrawals from the Potter vaults were meticulously documented and applied to legitimate expenses related to Lord Potterblack's welfare and security. These included payments to his Muggle relatives for his care, funding for protective wards and monitoring charms around his residence, stipends for Order of the Phoenix members assigned to his covert protection, and establishment of educational trusts to ensure his future at Hogwarts. He turned to address the gallery directly. As for the alleged concealment of his inheritance, Albus Dumbledore acted in accordance with the long-standing tradition of progressive disclosure for magical heirs, particularly those facing unusual dangers. Information about the Potter and Black estates was to be provided as Lord Potterblack matured and demonstrated readiness to manage such responsibilities, a process that had already begun this past year with discussions about the Black inheritance following Sirius Black's death. Returning his attention to the Withdrawals, Doge concluded, the plaintiff's characterization of exploitation fails to acknowledge the exceptional circumstances surrounding Harry Potter's life and the genuine protective intentions behind Albus Dumbledore's actions. We ask this body to consider the full context before rendering judgment on measures taken during our society's darkest hours, by a wizard who has dedicated his life to the greater good of all. As Doge resumed his seat, Harry noted the strategic framing of the defense, positioning Dumbledore's actions as necessary exceptions during extraordinary times rather than denying the underlying facts. It was clever, playing to the wizarding world's tendency to grant exceptional leeway to those fighting dark forces. Amelia Bones adjusted her monocle, surveying the chamber before speaking. The Withdrawals has heard the opening positions. We will now proceed to the presentation of evidence, beginning with the plaintiff's case. Katsaros rose again. The plaintiff calls Ragnok, director of Gringotts Bank, to present the financial evidence. A ripple of surprise passed through the chamber. Goblins rarely appeared before the Withdrawals, particularly high-ranking bank officials. The side door opened to admit Ragnok, whose scarred face and formal attire created an imposing impression as he approached the witness stand. After being sworn in through the goblin variation of the truth oath, Ragnok produced a large leather-bound ledger bearing the Gringotts seal. Director Ragnok, Katsaros began, please explain to the Withdrawals how the irregularities in the Potter accounts were discovered. During a security upgrade of our lineage-based vaults earlier this year, we implemented new authentication protocols requiring direct blood-based verification for all withdrawals, Ragnok explained, his deep voice carrying clearly throughout the chamber. The Potter family vault triggered multiple retroactive security alerts due to withdrawals authorized without proper blood verification over a period of 15 years. And what did your subsequent audit reveal? Ragnok opened the ledger, his long fingers tracing down a page of precise entries. We identified 89 withdrawals made by Albus Dumbledore between November 7, 1981, and June 18, 1996. The total amount withdrawn was 3,724,513 galleons, 7 sickles, and 3 nuts. The specific figures caused another wave of murmurs through the gallery. Seeing such precise numbers somehow made the theft more real, more concrete than the rounded 3.7 million figure. Were these withdrawals authorized by Lord Potterblack or his parents prior to their deaths? Katsaros asked. They were not, Ragnok stated definitively. No authorization from any Potter exists in our records for these transactions. Dumbledore presented documentation of magical guardianship as his sole authorization. And what was the nature of this guardianship documentation? A letter signed by Minister Millicent Bagnall dated November 2, 1981, granting temporary emergency guardianship for the purpose of securing the child's placement, Ragnok replied. Notably, this letter specified temporary measures pending proper legal proceedings which never occurred. Katsaros nodded. Please tell the Wizengamot what happened when Lord Potterblack first learned of these unauthorized withdrawals. He was shocked, Ragnok said simply. Until our meeting on July 19 of this year, Lord Potterblack had no knowledge of the family vault's existence, the extent of his inheritance, or the withdrawals made by Albus Dumbledore. He believed his only financial asset was his trust vault established for school expenses. And what actions did Lord Potterblack take upon learning of these withdrawals? He requested a complete accounting of all Potter and Black assets, claimed his lordships as was his right by blood and magic, and initiated legal proceedings to recover the misappropriated funds, Ragnok recounted. His actions were measured and appropriate given the circumstances. Katsaros gestured toward the ledger. Would you please share with the Wizengamot the specific categories of withdrawals made by Albus Dumbledore? Ragnok turned several pages in the ledger. The withdrawals fall into 7 primary categories as labeled in the transaction records. First, direct transfers to Albus Dumbledore's personal accounts totaling 937,500 galleons, listed as administrative fees for managing the Potter estate. Gasps echoed through the chamber at the figure, nearly 1 million galleons directly to Dumbledore's personal accounts. Second, monthly payments of 300 galleons to Vernon and Petunia Desley, totaling 54,000 galleons over 15 years, designated for Potter care and maintenance. Third, monthly payments to various Order of the Phoenix members totaling 823,700 galleons, categorized as security services. Ragnok continued through the remaining categories: educational subsidies to the Weasley family totaling 210,000 galleons, property maintenance costs for various Potter holdings of 312,800 galleons, funding for Order operations at 916,513 galleons, and miscellaneous expenses, totaling 470,000 galleons with minimal documentation. By the time he finished, the chamber had grown uncomfortably silent as the Wizengamot members absorbed the extent and systematic nature of the withdrawals. Director Ragnok, Katsaros asked, in your professional opinion, were these withdrawals consistent with standard guardianship practices for orphaned heirs of ancient houses? They were not, Ragnok stated firmly. Standard practice requires establishment of an independent trust with oversight by at least 3 designated trustees, regular financial reporting to the Wizengamot's Orphaned Heirs Committee, and creation of a formal accounting to be presented to the heir upon reaching majority. None of these safeguards were implemented in Lord Potterblack's case. Katsaros nodded. No further questions for this witness. Amelia Bones turned to the defense table. Does the defense wish to cross-examine? Doge rose slowly. Yes, Madam Bones. He approached the witness stand, regarding Ragnok with cautious respect. Director Ragnok, is it not true that in the aftermath of the Wizarding War, many standard procedures were temporarily suspended due to the chaotic circumstances? Some ministry procedures were modified, Ragnok acknowledged. Gringotts' procedures regarding inheritance protections remained unchanged. Yet Gringotts continued to process these withdrawals for 15 years without raising concerns, Doge pointed out. Why the sudden objection now? Ragnok's expression darkened slightly. As I explained, our security protocols have evolved. Additionally, the 1994 Goblin Banking Treaty granted us greater autonomy in questioning wizarding documentation we deem suspicious, autonomy we did not legally possess in 1981. Doge nodded as if this confirmed something. So these withdrawals were, in fact, technically legal under the banking regulations in place at the time they occurred? They were procedurally processed according to the regulations of that period, Ragnok conceded carefully. Whether they were legal under wizarding guardianship law is for this body to determine, not Gringotts. One final question, Doge said. Is it not true that the Potter family vault contains considerably more than the 3.7 million galleons in question? That even after these withdrawals, Lord Potterblack remains one of the wealthiest wizards in Britain? Katzeros rose immediately. Objection. The relative wealth of the plaintiff is irrelevant to whether funds were misappropriated. Sustained, Bones ruled before Ragnok could answer. The defense will restrict its questioning to relevant matters of fact. Doge bowed slightly. No further questions. As Ragnok stepped down, Harry leaned closer to Katzeros. He's trying to suggest the theft doesn't matter because I'm still rich, he whispered. A predictable tactic, Katzeros murmured back. He's appealing to the Wisengamot members' potential resentment of inherited wealth. We anticipated this. Bones addressed the chamber again. The plaintiff may call their next witness. The plaintiff calls healer Yasmin Shafiq, Katzeros announced. Healer Shafiq entered with professional composure, her formal healer's robes creating an immediate impression of medical authority as she took the witness stand and accepted the truth oath. Healer Shafiq, Katzeros began, please state your qualifications and explain how you came to examine Lord Potterblack. I am a licensed master healer specializing in magical development and core trauma, with 32 years of practice, she stated. I was engaged through Gringotts to conduct a comprehensive health assessment of Lord Potterblack on July 19 of this year, following the discovery of financial irregularities. And what did your examination reveal? Healer Shafiq consulted her notes. I identified 3 concerning categories of findings. First, Lord Potterblack showed clear signs of childhood malnutrition and neglect, including improperly healed fractures and stunted growth patterns inconsistent with his genetic potential. She looked up, her professional demeanor unwavering despite the disturbing nature of her testimony. Second, I discovered multiple magical bindings on his core, spells designed to restrict and control his natural magical development and expression. These bindings had been applied in layers, beginning in infancy and modified periodically throughout his childhood, most recently within the past year. And finally, she continued, I detected evidence of multiple memory modifications, loyalty compulsions, and behavioral conditioning spells, magical interventions typically classified as mind-affecting and subject to strict ministry regulation when used on minors. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Katzeros allowed the reaction to subside before asking, in your professional opinion, were these magical interventions medically necessary or appropriate? They were not, Healer Shafiq stated emphatically. Core bindings are only medically indicated in cases of dangerous magical instability, which Lord Potterblack did not exhibit. Such bindings require ministry approval and regular monitoring by licensed healers, neither of which occurred in this case. Similarly, the compulsion and conditioning spells had no therapeutic justification and would typically be classified as prohibited manipulations when performed on a minor without guardian consent, which is particularly problematic when the apparent caster was himself claiming guardianship authority. What effects did these magical interventions have on Lord Potterblack? The core bindings artificially restricted his magical development and likely contributed to academic and practical magical performance below his natural potential, she explained. The compulsion spells created artificial loyalty bonds and behavioral patterns that compromised his autonomy and decision-making. Essentially, his magical and psychological development was being externally controlled rather than allowed to progress naturally. And were you able to identify who cast these spells? Magical signatures can be difficult to attribute with absolute certainty, Healer Shafiq acknowledged, but the primary signature on both the core bindings and compulsion spells was consistent with samples of Albus Dumbledore's magical casting that we have on record from public spellwork. One final question, Katzeros said. Were any of these magical interventions disclosed in Lord Potterblack's medical records at Hogwarts? No, she replied firmly. I reviewed those records as part of my assessment. They contain no mention of core bindings, compulsion spells, or any ongoing magical treatments beyond standard healing for Quidditch injuries and similar incidents. Thank you, Healer Shafiq, Katsuros concluded. No further questions. Doge rose for cross-examination, looking distinctly uncomfortable with the medical testimony. Healer Shafiq, is it possible that the magical bindings you detected were applied as protective measures rather than restrictive ones? Perhaps to shield an infant with unusual magical circumstances from detection by dark forces? Protective wards and shielding spells have distinctly different magical signatures than restrictive bindings, Healer Shafiq replied with professional certainty. What I detected were definitively suppressive in nature, designed to contain and control rather than protect. But given the unique circumstances of Lord Potterblack's survival of the killing curse, might unconventional measures have been necessary? Doge pressed. Measures that might appear concerning in normal contexts but were appropriate for his unique situation. Even in extraordinary circumstances, medical ethics require documentation, transparency, and ongoing assessment of necessity, she countered firmly. None of these bindings were documented, disclosed to the patient or subsequent medical providers, or regularly evaluated for continued necessity. That pattern is inconsistent with legitimate medical or protective intervention, regardless of the circumstances. Doge's expression suggested he recognized he was making little headway. No further questions. As Healer Shafiq stepped down, Harry noticed Dumbledore watching him with an inscrutable expression, not the anger or defensiveness one might expect, but something more complex, almost contemplative. The evidence presentation continued with testimony from a ministry archivist confirming no proper guardianship proceedings had ever been conducted, despite references to temporary emergency measures in the initial documents. Augusta Longbottom testified regarding the traditional alliances between ancient houses that had been allowed to lapse during Harry's isolation from his heritage. Even Professor McGonagall was called to confirm she had never been consulted about Harry's placement despite being named as a potential guardian in the Potter's will. Throughout, Harry maintained the composed demeanor Neville and Luna had helped him practice, though inwardly he seethed at each new revelation of manipulation and control. The systematic nature of Dumbledore's actions became increasingly clear, not impulsive decisions in crisis, but a carefully orchestrated program of isolation and control spanning 15 years. Finally, Katsuros announced, the plaintiff calls Lord Harry James Potterblack. Harry rose, feeling the weight of every eye in the chamber as he approached the witness stand. After accepting the truth oath, he faced the Wizengamot with the same steady gaze he had once directed at Voldemort himself. Lord Potterblack, Katsuros began formally, please describe your understanding of your family heritage and financial status prior to July 19th of this year. I believed my only inheritance was my trust vault at Gringotts, Harry replied clearly. I was told my parents had left me enough money for school, but nothing about family properties, lordships, or the main Potter vault. I knew nothing about the Black inheritance until after Sirius died, and even then, only that I'd inherited his house and house elf. Who provided you information about your parents and family history during your childhood? No one, really, Harry said. My aunt and uncle told me my parents died in a car crash and forbade questions about them. When I entered the wizarding world at 11, I received fragments of information, primarily about their deaths and my survival, rather than their lives or our family. Did Albus Dumbledore ever discuss your family heritage or inheritance with you during your 5 years at Hogwarts? Never, Harry stated firmly. Our conversations focused almost exclusively on Voldemort, the prophecy, and my role in the coming conflict. Family history, inheritance, political responsibilities, none of these were mentioned. Katsuros nodded. Please describe your living conditions with your Muggle relatives, the Dursleys. Harry hesitated, uncomfortable discussing his childhood publicly but understanding its relevance. Until I received my Hogwarts letter, I slept in a cupboard under the stairs. After that, I was given my cousin's second bedroom. I wore my cousin's cast-off clothing, received minimal food, often less than the rest of the family, and was assigned extensive household chores from a young age. Were you ever physically abused? My cousin and his friends regularly beat me up, what they called Harry hunting, Harry replied, keeping his voice steady. My uncle occasionally grabbed me roughly or struck me when particularly angry. Nothing that required hospitalization, but enough to leave bruises. Did any wizarding authority figure ever check on your welfare or living conditions? Not that I'm aware of, Harry said. I later learned our neighbor, Mrs. Fig, was reporting to Dumbledore, but no one ever intervened despite obvious signs of neglect. What was your reaction upon learning of the unauthorized withdrawals from your family vault? Harry's expression hardened slightly. I felt betrayed. Money was being taken from me to pay for my own mistreatment. The Dursleys received 300 galleons monthly while providing me cast-off clothes and inadequate food. People I thought were helping me out of kindness were being paid from my own vaults without my knowledge. And what do you seek from these proceedings, Lord Potterblack? Harry looked directly at the Wizengamot members as he answered. Justice and accountability. I want the misappropriated funds returned, yes, but more importantly, I want the truth acknowledged. No child should have their inheritance stolen, their magic bound, or their mind manipulated, regardless of who does it or what justification they claim. Thank you, Katsuros concluded. No further questions. Doge approached for cross-examination, his expression sympathetic yet determined. Lord Potterblack, do you acknowledge that you faced unique dangers throughout your childhood due to your role in the defeat of he who must not be named? I acknowledge that Voldemort and his followers represented a threat to me, Harry replied carefully, just as they did to many others who opposed him. And would you agree that protecting you from these threats might have required unusual security measures? Reasonable security measures, yes, Harry conceded. But those measures should have been transparent to me as I matured, not concealed behind manipulation and lies. Doge nodded thoughtfully. You mentioned feeling betrayed by learning people were paid from your vaults. Is it possible that Albus Dumbledore arranged these payments to ensure you had a network of protection without burdening those providing it? If that was his intention, he should have explained it to me, Harry countered. Instead, he created situations where I felt indebted to people who were actually being paid from my own inheritance. That's manipulation, not protection. You've accomplished remarkable things during your time at Hogwarts, Doge observed. Defeating trolls, basilisks, even facing he who must not be named multiple times. Is it not possible that Professor Dumbledore was preparing you for these challenges in ways you didn't fully understand? Harry met Doge's gaze steadily. If binding my magic and implanting compulsion spells was preparation, it was counterproductive. I survived those encounters despite restricted magic, not because of it. One final question, Doge said. Given Professor Dumbledore's long history of fighting dark forces and protecting the wizarding world, do you truly believe his actions toward you were motivated by malice rather than concern for your welfare? I don't claim to know his motivations, Harry replied carefully. I can only judge his actions, which systematically isolated me, kept me ignorant of my heritage, bound my magic, and diverted my inheritance. Whether he did these things out of malice, misguided paternalism, or something else entirely doesn't change the harm they caused. Doge nodded, seemingly satisfied with having at least raised the question of motivation. No further questions. As Harry returned to his seat beside Katsuros, he felt emotionally drained but strangely liberated. Speaking these truths publicly after years of silent compliance felt like breaking yet another binding spell, one that had constrained not his magic but his voice. The plaintiff rests, Katsuros announced. Amelia Bones nodded. We will take a brief recess before the defense presents their case. This chamber will reconvene in 30 minutes. As the Wizengamot members filed out, the gallery erupted in excited conversation. Harry remained seated, deliberately avoiding looking toward Dumbledore or the spectators. Neville approached from the witness section, offering a supportive nod. You did brilliantly, he murmured. Gran says the Bones and Abbott contingents were visibly affected by your testimony. The Raxperts around the Wizengamot are dispersing, Luna added, joining them. Clarity is spreading. Katsuros leaned closer to Harry. Prepare yourself for the defense presentation. Dumbledore will likely testify personally, presenting himself as the wise protector acting for the greater good. Stay centered in your truth, regardless of his narrative. Harry nodded, drawing a deep breath as he mentally prepared for what would undoubtedly be Dumbledore's most compelling performance yet, the benevolent guardian forced to make difficult choices during extraordinary times. When the proceedings resumed, the defense called several character witnesses first, Order members who testified to Dumbledore's dedication to fighting dark forces, former students who spoke of his wisdom and guidance, even Minister Fudge himself, who reluctantly acknowledged Dumbledore's historical contributions despite their recent political conflicts. The strategy was obvious: establish Dumbledore's credentials as a force for good before addressing the specific allegations. Harry watched impassively as witness after witness extolled the headmaster's virtues, noting that none directly addressed the financial evidence or magical bindings presented earlier. Finally, Doge announced, "The defense calls Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore." A hush fell over the chamber as Dumbledore approached the witness stand with serene dignity. His long silver beard gleamed in the magical light as he accepted the truth oath without hesitation, his blue eyes clear and steady behind half-moon spectacles. "Professor Dumbledore," Doge began respectfully, "please explain to the Wisengamot the circumstances under which you assumed responsibility for Harry Potter following his parents' deaths." Dumbledore folded his hands contemplatively before responding. The night of October 31, 1981, presented an unprecedented situation. James and Lily Potter were dead. Voldemort had apparently been defeated, though I had reason to believe this defeat was temporary. Harry had survived through ancient magic invoked by his mother's sacrifice, magic that required special handling and protection. He gazed around the chamber, his expression grave. Within hours, it became clear that remaining Death Eaters were targeting the Potter child. Sirius Black had apparently betrayed the family's location. The magical community was in chaos. Immediate decisions were required to ensure Harry's safety. In consultation with Minister Bagnold and Bartemius Crouch, I implemented emergency protective measures. The child needed to be placed where both magical and blood protections could be established, his mother's sacrifice creating a powerful shield that could only be maintained through her blood relations. "And the financial arrangements?" Doge prompted. "The Potter estate required management," Dumbledore explained. "Properties needed maintenance, investments oversight, security measures funding. Additionally, those providing protection for Harry, either directly or indirectly, deserved compensation for the risks they assumed. All withdrawals were meticulously documented and applied to legitimate expenses related to Harry's welfare and the broader protective network surrounding him." Doge nodded. "What about the magical interventions Healer Shafik identified, the core bindings and compulsion spells?" Here, Dumbledore's expression grew more solemn. Following the events of that Halloween night, Harry's magical core showed concerning anomalies, likely resulting from his exposure to the killing curse and the violent magical backlash of Voldemort's temporary defeat. His infant magic was erratic, potentially dangerous to himself and others. The initial bindings were applied as a medical necessity, a stabilizing measure for a magically traumatized child. Subsequent adjustments were made as his magic developed, always with the intention of ensuring controlled, safe magical growth rather than the dangerous fluctuations that might have otherwise occurred. And the compulsion spells? Protective guidance enchantments, Dumbledore characterized them. Harry's unique status as both the boy who lived and a prophecy subject made him vulnerable to manipulation by those with dark intentions. These enchantments were designed to reinforce caution around strangers, encourage seeking help from trusted adults, and avoid dangerous situations. They were never intended to control his fundamental choices, merely to provide additional protection in potentially vulnerable moments. Harry barely managed to contain his reaction to this creative reframing of the spells that had pushed him to trust Dumbledore implicitly and seek approval from those the headmaster designated as trustworthy. Why not inform Harry of his full inheritance as he grew older? Doge asked. "I had intended to begin that process this coming year," Dumbledore replied with apparent regret. With Voldemort's return confirmed publicly and Harry approaching his 17th birthday, the time seemed right to gradually introduce him to his full heritage. He sighed softly. "Perhaps I was overly cautious in withholding this information. But one must understand the context." Harry's fame already created immense pressure. Adding the responsibilities of two ancient houses seemed an unnecessary burden on a young man already carrying the weight of a prophecy and the expectations of the wizarding world. Doge nodded sympathetically. In summary, how would you characterize your intentions regarding Harry Potter throughout these 15 years? Dumbledore's blue eyes seemed to glisten slightly as he answered. Everything I did, every decision, every intervention, was motivated by one overriding concern: keeping Harry alive and as psychologically whole as possible in the face of extraordinary dangers and expectations. If, in pursuing that goal, I made errors of judgment or held too tightly to information that should have been shared, I can only say that I acted out of deep concern for a child placed in an impossible situation. He turned slightly toward Harry. I never sought personal gain from the Potter fortune. The administrative fees covered legitimate expenses in managing a complex estate and security network. I would willingly submit to Veritasrum to confirm that not a single canute was spent on personal indulgences. Doge nodded, satisfied with the carefully crafted narrative. No further questions. Amelia Bones turned to the plaintiff's table. Mr. Katsaros, your cross-examination. Katsaros rose with measured confidence, approaching the witness stand deliberately. Professor Dumbledore, you've presented a narrative of emergency measures and protective intentions. Let's examine the documentation supporting this narrative. Where are the medical records documenting Harry Potter's alleged magical instability following that Halloween night? Dumbledore's expression remained serene. Given the unprecedented nature of his survival, I conducted the magical assessment personally rather than exposing him to St. Mungo's, where his presence would have created a security risk. My findings were recorded in my personal journals. Convenient, Katsaros observed. And the regular monitoring such core bindings would require under standard medical protocols. Again, I monitored his condition personally during his years at Hogwarts, Dumbledore replied. His unique circumstances required discretion. Katsaros nodded as if this confirmed something. A pattern emerges, Professor, one of personal oversight without independent verification or transparency. Let's continue. Why was Sirius Black denied a trial when he was the legally designated guardian in the Potter's will? For the first time, Dumbledore appeared slightly uncomfortable. Those decisions were made by the Department of Magical Law Enforcement under Bartemius Crouch's direction. While I did not object at the time, believing like many that the evidence against Black was overwhelming, I did not personally prevent his trial. Indeed. Katsaros produced a document. I submit to the Wisengamot a memorandum dated November 5, 1981, from you to Minister Bagnold and Director Crouch, specifically recommending against a trial for Sirius Black on grounds that it would re-traumatize the public and potentially complicate custody arrangements already implemented for the Potter heir. Murmurs spread through the chamber as copies of the document appeared before each Wisengamot member. Dumbledore's expression remained composed, though a slight tightening around his eyes suggested the revelation had not been anticipated. The document speaks for itself, he acknowledged after a moment. In the immediate aftermath, with evidence apparently clear-cut, a public trial seemed unnecessary additional trauma for a society already reeling from war. My assessment proved incorrect, as we now know, but was made in good faith based on information available at the time. Let us turn to the financial matters, Katsaros continued. You transferred nearly 1 million galleons to your personal accounts as administrative fees. What administrative work justified this extraordinary sum? The management of a magical estate the size of the Potters requires considerable time and expertise, Dumbledore explained. Additionally, coordinating the extensive security network protecting Harry, maintaining international magical contacts monitoring for Death Eater activity, and researching the ancient protections invoked by Lily Potter's sacrifice, all while fulfilling my duties as headmaster, supreme mugwump, and chief warlock, represented a substantial commitment. A commitment you voluntarily assumed without court appointment or oversight, Katsaros pointed out. And one that conveniently granted you control over significant financial resources. Dumbledore's eyes lost some of their twinkle. If you are implying I sought guardianship for financial gain, you are mistaken. The Potter fortune was a responsibility, not an opportunity. Yet you felt entitled to substantial compensation from that fortune without disclosure to its rightful heir, Katsaros noted. One final question, Professor. If your intentions toward Harry Potter were purely protective and benevolent, why did you deliberately conceal from him his parents' will, which explicitly stated he was never to be placed with the Dursleys under any circumstances? The chamber fell absolutely silent as this question hung in the air. For the first time, Dumbledore appeared genuinely discomfited. The blood protection was paramount, he finally answered. Regardless of Lily and James's personal feelings about Petunia Dursley, the magical protection afforded by the blood connection outweighed other considerations. I made a difficult choice between respecting their stated wishes and ensuring their son's survival. A choice that happened to maximize your control over both Harry Potter and his inheritance, Katsaros observed quietly. No further questions. As Katsaros returned to his seat, Harry studied Dumbledore's face. The headmaster's expression remained outwardly composed, but something in his eyes had changed, a recognition, perhaps, that his carefully constructed justifications were unraveling under the weight of documented facts and logical inconsistencies. The defense called several more witnesses, including Molly Weasley, who tearfully insisted her family had never known the money they received came from Harry's vaults, and Minerva McGonagall, who reluctantly admitted she had expressed concerns about Harry's placement with the Dursleys but had ultimately deferred to Dumbledore's judgment. Finally, both sides presented closing arguments. Doge emphasized the extraordinary circumstances following Voldemort's fall, the genuine threats to Harry's safety, and Dumbledore's lifetime of service to the greater good. Katsaros countered with the systematic pattern of isolation and control, the financial self-dealing, and the fundamental violation of guardianship trust. As the arguments concluded, Amelia Bones addressed the chamber. The Wisengamot will now retire to deliberate. This is a civil case requiring a simple majority vote to reach judgment. We will return when a decision has been reached. The waiting period that followed was among the most difficult Harry had ever experienced. Luna and Neville remained steadfastly by his side, offering quiet support without empty reassurances. Katsaros reviewed potential outcomes and next steps regardless of the verdict. The evidence is compelling, the solicitor observed. But never underestimate the power of reputation and established narratives. Dumbledore has been the moral center of Wizarding Britain for decades. Many will struggle to reconcile that image with the facts presented today. Nearly 2 hours passed before the chamber doors reopened and the Wisengamot members filed back to their seats. Harry straightened, instinctively gripping the edge of the table as Amelia Bones took her position. The Wisengamot has reached its verdict in the case of Potterblack versus Dumbledore, she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. By a vote of 31 to 19, this body finds in favor of the plaintiff, Lord Harry James Potterblack. A collective gasp swept through the gallery, followed by an eruption of voices that Bones quickly silenced with a sharp rap of her gavel. The Wisengamot finds that Albus Dumbledore exceeded his authority as self-appointed guardian, misappropriated funds from the Potter family vaults without proper legal authorization, and failed to fulfill the fiduciary responsibilities of magical guardianship. She unrolled a formal scroll. The judgment is as follows. Albus Dumbledore is ordered to repay the full sum of 3,724,513 galleons, 7 sickles, and 3 nuts to the Potter family vault within 30 days. Additionally, punitive damages of 1,275,487 galleons are assessed, bringing the total judgment to 5 million galleons. Bones continued, her voice stern. Furthermore, Albus Dumbledore is required to provide complete documentation of all actions taken as self-appointed guardian, including detailed accounting of all expenditures, copies of all correspondence regarding Harry Potter, and disclosure of all magical interventions performed. She paused before delivering the final component. Given the serious nature of the unauthorized magical bindings and compulsion spells identified in this case, the Wisengamot refers this matter to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement for review and potential criminal charges under the Magical Child Protection Act of 1893. This civil judgment does not preclude subsequent criminal proceedings. The chamber erupted again, louder than before. Harry sat motionless, stunned by the comprehensive victory. He had expected at best a partial judgment, perhaps the return of the funds, but with Dumbledore's reputation largely intact. Instead, the Withdrawals had delivered a complete vindication and opened the door to potential criminal charges. He turned to look at Dumbledore. The headmaster sat perfectly still, his expression one of profound sadness rather than anger or shock. When he noticed Harry's gaze, he inclined his head slightly in what might have been acknowledgement or resignation before turning away. Katzeros leaned close to Harry. "A comprehensive victory," he murmured. "More complete than I had dared hope. The political landscape of Wizarding Britain will be fundamentally altered by today's events." Harry nodded, still processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. "What happens now?" "Legally, Dumbledore must comply with the judgment or face additional penalties," Katzeros explained. "Politically, his position as Chief Warlock is likely untenable, and his other roles may come under scrutiny as well. For you, Lord Potterblack, this represents complete vindication and restoration of your autonomy." Bones rapped her gavel once more. "This concludes the proceedings in the case of Potterblack versus Dumbledore. The judgment is entered into permanent record. This session of the Withdrawals is adjourned." As the chamber began to clear, Harry found himself surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. Augusta Longbottom offered formal congratulations on behalf of House Longbottom. Fred and George gave him matching thumbs-up from across the room. Even Narcissa Malfoy inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement from the gallery. Yet amid the supportive faces, Harry noted conspicuous absences. Ron and Hermione had not attended the trial. No Weasleys approached except the twins. And Dumbledore himself had been quickly escorted out a side entrance, surrounded by supporters shielding him from the press. "We should depart before the media descends completely," Katzeros advised, noting the reporters already pushing toward the barrier separating the court floor from the gallery. Harry nodded, suddenly exhausted by the emotional intensity of the day. "Back to Potter Manor?" "An excellent idea," Neville agreed. "Gran has invited several allied family heads to join us this evening to discuss next steps. With the lawsuit resolved, it's time to consider the broader political implications." Luna touched Harry's arm gently. "First rest, though. Even victors need recovery time." As they made their way toward a private exit, Harry was surprised to find Professor McGonagall waiting in the corridor, her expression a complex mixture of regret and resolve. "Mr. Potter," she began, then corrected herself. "Lord Potterblack. I wonder if I might have a moment." Harry glanced at his companions, who tactfully moved a short distance away to give them privacy. "Professor," he acknowledged, uncertain where this conversation might lead. McGonagall's posture was rigid, but her eyes betrayed genuine emotion. "I owe you an apology," she said directly. "I failed in my duty of care to you repeatedly over the years. I deferred to Albus's judgment regarding your placement and welfare when I should have questioned more forcefully." Harry studied his head of house carefully. "You testified you raised concerns about the Dursleys." "Initial concerns only," she acknowledged grimly. "When I observed their character before your placement. But thereafter, I accepted Albus's assurances that you were safe and well treated, despite indications to the contrary when you arrived at Hogwarts clearly underweight and wearing inappropriate clothing." She straightened, facing him squarely. "I was named as a potential guardian in your parents' will. Had I fulfilled my responsibility to James and Lily properly, I would have demanded regular welfare checks regardless of Albus's security concerns. My failure to do so contributed to your suffering, and for that, I am deeply sorry." The direct apology, delivered without excuses or qualifications, caught Harry by surprise. Throughout his life, adults had rarely acknowledged their failures toward him so plainly. "I appreciate your honesty, Professor," he said finally. "What happens now?" "With Hogwarts, I mean. The Board of Governors will meet tomorrow to discuss Professor Dumbledore's position," she replied. "Given today's judgment, his continued tenure as headmaster is, uncertain at best. As deputy headmistress, I may be asked to assume his duties, at least temporarily. She hesitated before adding, should that occur, I want to assure you that you will be welcome at Hogwarts to complete your education, free from manipulation or control. Whatever changes come, the school remains your rightful place if you choose to return. Harry nodded, appreciating the sentiment if not entirely convinced. Thank you, Professor. I haven't decided yet about returning, but I'll consider it. That is all I can ask, she acknowledged. Good day, Lord Potterblack. As McGonagall departed, Harry rejoined his companions, feeling emotionally drained but oddly lighter, as if an invisible weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. Home. Luna suggested gently. Home, Harry agreed, the word carrying new meaning now that Potter Manor truly felt like his own. Let's go home. The weeks following the trial brought rapid changes to Wizarding Britain. Dumbledore resigned his position as Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot the day after the judgment, citing a desire to focus on educational responsibilities. 3 days later, following an emergency meeting of the Hogwarts Board of Governors, he also stepped down as headmaster, with McGonagall appointed as interim replacement. The Daily Prophet, suddenly aware of Harry's controlling interest in the publication, dramatically shifted its coverage, publishing a multi-part investigative series on the Dumbledore Legacy Reconsidered that examined both his achievements and his more questionable decisions over decades of public service. The Quibbler, meanwhile, ran an exclusive interview with Harry, allowing him to tell his story in his own words without sensationalism or distortion. The issue sold out 3 printings, establishing the formerly fringe publication as a serious journalistic alternative to the Prophet. Political realignments occurred with dizzying speed. The traditional alliances of ancient houses, dormant for decades, reactivated around the Potterblack Longbottom core. Amelia Bones formalized her family's renewed alliance with House Potter, bringing with her the support of the DMLE and several moderate Wizengamot factions. Even the Greengrass and Davis families, traditionally neutral, signaled interest in formal association with the emerging Potter bloc. Through it all, Harry remained primarily at Potter Manor, continuing his magical education under private tutors while learning the responsibilities of his lordships. The Potter family journals proved invaluable, offering guidance from ancestors who had navigated similar political waters in previous centuries. His magical development accelerated dramatically following the complete removal of Dumbledore's bindings, revealing abilities and affinities that had been artificially suppressed for years. Relationships evolved as well. Neville and Luna remained his most steadfast allies, practically taking up residence at Potter Manor as they helped him navigate his new position in wizarding society. The twins visited regularly, their business thriving as Harry's formal investment partner. Susan Bones and Hannah Abbott joined their expanding social circle, strengthening the alliance between their families. Ron and Hermione remained distant at first, struggling to reconcile their loyalty to Dumbledore with the evidence presented at trial. Ron eventually sent a tentative letter of apology, acknowledging he should have supported Harry regardless of his parents' position. Hermione's reconciliation came more gradually, beginning with a detailed letter analyzing the trial evidence and concluding that, while Dumbledore's intentions might have been initially good, his methods had become increasingly indefensible over time. One evening in late August, Harry sat in his family's study reviewing correspondence regarding the upcoming Wizengamot session. The political landscape continued to shift as various factions repositioned themselves in the wake of Dumbledore's fall from prominence. Meanwhile, the threat of Voldemort loomed in the background, with sporadic attacks suggesting the Dark Lord was carefully observing the power realignments before making significant moves. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, setting aside a particularly tedious proposal regarding international cauldron thickness regulations. Luna entered, her expression unusually serious. "You have a visitor," she announced. "Albus Dumbledore is at the gates, requesting an audience." Harry straightened in surprise. He hadn't seen or communicated with Dumbledore since the trial. The judgment had been paid in full from the headmaster's personal accounts, and the required documentation delivered through legal intermediaries, but no direct contact had occurred. "Did he say why he's here?" Harry asked, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected development. Only that he wishes to speak with you privately on a matter of great importance, Luna replied. The manor wards indicate he came alone and is carrying no hidden portkeys or harmful devices. Harry considered his options carefully. Part of him wanted to refuse the meeting out of lingering anger. Yet another part, perhaps the part that had grown into Lord Potterblack rather than remaining just Harry, recognized that understanding Dumbledore's perspective might be valuable, regardless of their history. I'll see him, he decided. Please show him to the formal receiving room, and let Neville know he's here. Luna nodded. I'll remain within calling distance. Just in case. 20 minutes later, Harry entered the receiving room to find Dumbledore standing by the window, gazing out at the Potter estate gardens. The former headmaster looked older somehow, the vitality that had always seemed to radiate from him diminished. He wore simple blue robes rather than his usual flamboyant attire, and his long beard appeared less meticulously groomed than Harry remembered. Professor Dumbledore, Harry acknowledged, deliberately using the title despite its technical inaccuracy now. You wish to speak with me? Dumbledore turned, offering a slight bow. Lord Potterblack. Thank you for agreeing to see me. I wouldn't have presumed except for the urgency of the matter. Please, sit, Harry gestured to one of the armchairs flanking the fireplace, taking the opposite seat himself. What brings you to Potter Manor? Dumbledore settled into the chair, his movements betraying a weariness Harry had never observed before. First, I must acknowledge that our last meeting occurred under adversarial circumstances. The trial's outcome was, just, regardless of my personal discomfort with it. I have complied fully with the Wisengamot's judgment and will continue to do so with any further legal requirements. I appreciate that, Harry said neutrally, waiting for the real purpose of this visit to emerge. My purpose today concerns matters beyond our personal history, Dumbledore continued, his blue eyes serious behind his half-moon spectacles. Specifically, information regarding Lord Voldemort that you require for your safety and, ultimately, for the resolution of the prophecy that binds your fates together. Harry leaned forward slightly. Despite everything, Dumbledore's knowledge of Voldemort remained unparalleled. I'm listening. You are aware of the prophecy's contents now, Dumbledore began. What you may not know is how Lord Voldemort has ensured his ability to return even when his body is destroyed, as occurred when you were an infant. He paused, seemingly choosing his words with great care. Tom Riddle delved into the darkest aspects of magic, seeking immortality through the most abhorrent means. He created anchors for his soul, objects containing fragments of his essence that prevent his complete death so long as they remain intact. Horcruxes, Harry said quietly. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. You're familiar with the term. The Black Family Library contains volumes on soul magic, Harry explained. After your binding spells were removed and healer Shafik identified a foreign magical signature in my scar, I researched possible explanations. I see. Dumbledore appeared momentarily discomfited by this evidence of Harry's independent research capabilities. Then you understand the gravity of what we face. Voldemort created multiple Horcruxes, more than any dark wizard in recorded history has attempted. How many? He intended 7, a magically powerful number, Dumbledore replied. I believe he succeeded in creating 6 before his attack on your parents, with you unintentionally becoming a pseudo-Horcrux when the killing curse rebounded. Harry nodded, having suspected as much from his research. The diary from the Chamber of Secrets was one. Indeed. I've identified several others, a ring belonging to his maternal grandfather, which I recently recovered and destroyed at great personal cost. He briefly raised his right hand, which Harry now noticed appeared blackened and withered. Helga Hufflepuff's cup. Salazar Slytherin's locket. An object belonging to Rowena Ravenclaw, likely her lost diadem. And his familiar, Nagini, who I believe was converted into a Horcrux after his resurrection. And the one in my scar? Harry asked directly. Dumbledore's expression grew grave. That is perhaps the most complex aspect. It is not a true Horcrux, as it was created accidentally rather than through the proper ritual. I believe it can be removed without harming you, though the process would be challenging. He leaned forward earnestly. Harry, despite our recent conflict, this information is crucial to defeating Voldemort permanently. I have spent years researching these objects, tracking their locations, understanding their protections. This knowledge should not be lost because of personal grievances between us. Harry studied the older wizard thoughtfully. Why tell me this now? Why not during the past 5 years when we met regularly at Hogwarts? A fair question. Dumbledore sighed deeply. I had intended to begin sharing this information this year, now that Voldemort's return was publicly confirmed. I planned to reveal it gradually, as you demonstrated readiness to handle increasingly disturbing concepts. He spread his hands in a gesture of concession. Perhaps that was another error in judgment on my part. Recent events have demonstrated that my assessment of your readiness was unnecessarily conservative. Harry considered this carefully. Whatever Dumbledore's faults and manipulations, his knowledge of Voldemort remained invaluable. Rejecting it out of lingering resentment would be self-defeating. I appreciate this information, he said finally. And I would welcome any specific details you have about the remaining Horcruxes' locations and protections. Relief flickered across Dumbledore's face. I've prepared a complete dossier. He withdrew a sealed portfolio from his robes. This contains everything I've learned about the Horcruxes, including my theories regarding potential hiding places, associated memories from various sources, and notes on the dark magic protecting them. Harry accepted the portfolio, feeling its weight, both physical and metaphorical, as he placed it on the small table beside his chair. Thank you. This will be extremely helpful. There is one more matter, Dumbledore said, his expression growing even more serious. The Horcrux within your scar. I had theorized a method for its removal that would not require your death, but my research remains incomplete. With my diminished position and resources, continuing this specific line of inquiry has become more difficult. Harry nodded slowly, understanding the implicit request. I'll have researchers from the Potter and Black libraries continue this work, incorporating your notes. If a solution exists, we'll find it. Thank you. Dumbledore rose slowly, appearing to have accomplished his primary purpose. I won't intrude on your time further. Whatever our past conflicts, Harry, I hope you understand that I have always wished for your ultimate victory against Voldemort, even when my methods proved misguided. As the former headmaster turned to leave, Harry found himself asking a question that had lingered since the trial. Professor, was any of it real? The concern, the guidance, the apparent affection? Or was it all manipulation to maintain control of the weapon you needed against Voldemort? Dumbledore paused, seeming to consider the question with genuine reflection rather than calculating a response. It was both, Harry, he finally answered, his voice heavy with what sounded like genuine regret. The concern was real, as was the desire to guide and protect you. But those genuine feelings became entangled with strategic necessities and, perhaps, an old man's hubris in believing he alone knew the proper path forward. He turned back, meeting Harry's gaze directly. I convinced myself that control was necessary for protection. That secrecy was kindness. That the ends justified increasingly questionable means. In doing so, I betrayed both your trust and my own principles. For that, I am truly sorry, though I know apologies change nothing. The straightforward acknowledgement, delivered without excuses or grandiose justifications, felt more genuine than anything Harry had heard from Dumbledore in years. It didn't erase the harm done, but it offered a kind of closure he hadn't realized he needed. Thank you for your honesty, Harry said quietly. And for this information. He gestured to the portfolio. Whatever our past, defeating Voldemort remains our common goal. Dumbledore nodded, a flicker of his old twinkle momentarily returning to his eyes. You've become a remarkable young man, Harry Potter. Your parents would be extraordinarily proud, not of your titles or wealth, but of your character and judgment in the face of challenges few could comprehend. With that, he offered a final, respectful bow before departing, leaving Harry alone with the Horcrux dossier and complicated thoughts about forgiveness, justice, and the continuing battle against a darker threat than Dumbledore had ever represented. The final weeks of summer passed in a whirlwind of activity. Harry assembled a specialized research team combining cursebreakers, unspeakables willing to work privately, and experts in soul magic from both Britain and the continent. Using Dumbledore's information as a foundation, they began systematically tracking the remaining Horcruxes while developing protocols for their safe destruction. Meanwhile, the political landscape continued to evolve. With Dumbledore's influence diminished and Voldemort still operating primarily from the shadows, a power vacuum had emerged in Wizarding Britain. Harry found himself increasingly at the center of an emerging coalition of moderate families seeking a middle path between Dumbledore's controlling progressivism and the pure-blood extremism of Voldemort's followers. The first meeting of the renewed alliance of ancient houses took place at Potter Manor in late August, bringing together representatives from 12 families. Augusta Longbottom, Amelia Bones, and Narcissa Malfoy, attending in her capacity as a daughter of House Black, joined Harry at the head table, symbolizing the breadth of the coalition across traditional political divisions. This alliance represents a return to Wizarding Britain's foundational principles, Harry addressed the gathering. Not blind adherence to tradition for tradition's sake, nor reckless change without respect for magical heritage. Rather, we seek a balanced path forward, preserving what works while reforming what doesn't, guided by magic and justice rather than individual ambition or ideology. The proposal garnered broad support, with even traditionally dark-aligned families expressing cautious interest in an alternative to Voldemort's increasingly erratic leadership. By the meeting's conclusion, a formal charter had been drafted establishing mutual defense pacts, coordinated Wisengamot voting strategies, and shared resources for the coming conflict with Voldemort. As September approached, Harry faced the decision about returning to Hogwarts. After lengthy discussions with his advisors and friends, he chose to return for his 6th year, partly to maintain connections with his peers, partly to access the castle's resources for Horcrux research, and partly because Hogwarts remained, despite everything, the first place he had ever felt at home. The night before his return to school, Harry stood on the balcony outside the Lord's chambers at Potter Manor, gazing across the moonlit grounds of his ancestral home. The past 2 months had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined when Ragnok's owl arrived that early July morning. Contemplating your empire? Luna's dreamy voice came from the doorway behind him. Harry turned with a smile. Hardly an empire. Just trying to memorize how it looks at night so I can picture it while I'm at Hogwarts. She joined him at the balcony rail, her silvery eyes reflecting the moonlight. The manor will be well maintained in your absence. Neville and I have arranged to visit weekends to ensure the research teams remain focused and the Alliance communications continue smoothly. I appreciate that, Harry said sincerely. I couldn't have managed any of this without you and Neville. That's what friends do, Luna replied simply. Not because they're paid from secret vault withdrawals, but because they see you clearly and value who you truly are. Harry chuckled at her characteristic directness. You always did see clearly, Luna. Even when I couldn't. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Luna spoke again. Everything changes tomorrow. Hogwarts won't be the same without Dumbledore. The school dynamics will shift as news of the Alliance spreads. And Voldemort won't remain passive forever. I know, Harry acknowledged. But for the first time, I feel prepared, not because someone else designed a path for me, but because I'm choosing it myself with full awareness of both the risks and the possibilities. Luna nodded, her expression unusually serious. The Raxperts are gone, but darker creatures circle. The battle for control may have been won, but the war for survival is just beginning. One Horcrux at a time, Harry said with quiet determination. One alliance at a time. One day at a time. We'll face whatever comes. Together, Luna added, slipping her hand into his with casual affection. As it should be. As they stood watching the stars well overhead, Harry reflected on the strange journey that had begun with a simple bank statement. From dependent child to emancipated lord, from manipulated pawn to alliance leader, from ignorant heir to informed adversary, each transformation had brought both challenges and opportunities, losses and gains. Tomorrow would bring new battles, both at Hogwarts and beyond. Voldemort remained a deadly threat. The wizarding world's political structure continued its tumultuous realignment. Questions about the Horcrux in his scar still required answers. Yet for the first time in his life, Harry faced these challenges not as someone else's weapon or tool, but as himself, Lord Potterblack, heir to ancient legacies, architect of his own destiny. The ledgers had revealed Dumbledore's betrayal, but they had also unlocked Harry's true inheritance, not just gold and titles, but autonomy, knowledge, and the freedom to choose his own path forward. Whatever came next, that freedom was a victory no one could take away. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.